Chapter 421. Purple Blood. Seeing the purple blood that didn't belong to an Earth creature, Tani no longer had any doubts and immediately arranged for the guards to send the two Skrulls to his laboratory. "I'll leave the rest to you. If you need anything else you can contact me at any time." After handing over the two Skrulls to Tani, Rog didn't intend to continue staying at the headquarters. Although his relationship with Tani is quite good, his reputation in the Alliance isn't very good. Tani, Hulk, Natasha, and Scott are the only four people in the Alliance who aren't dissatisfied with Rog's domineering style. As for Rogers and the other members of the American team, they more or less had some complaints about him. Especially after he openly threatened the protesters in the live news broadcast, their evaluation of Rog became lower and lower. If it weren't for the fact that Roger was far stronger than them, perhaps Rogers would have brought the Special Forces of the United States to capture him at any time. However, Rog didn't care about the dissatisfaction of Rogers and the others. "I like it when you don't like me but can't do anything to me." "No problem. If Konoha needs any help you can contact the Alliance at any time," Tani replied. Afterward, Rog used the portal magic and returned to Konoha's headquarters. Both Konoha and the Alliance's special forces are outside searching for Skrulls. The only difference is that Konoha openly sent out their special forces, while the Alliance can only send out their special forces secretly. After all, the Alliance is different from Konoha. Konoha can completely ignore people's evaluation and opinions, but the Alliance can't. After handing over the two Skrulls to Tani, Rog didn't go out to look for Skrulls again. He had no interest in these ordinary Skrull people. Unless Daisy and the others find the legendary Super Skrulls, he won't make a move. A week passed in the blink of an eye. When Rog played the Kree Empire console game in Konoha's headquarters for a whole week, he finally received a call from Tani. "Come over, the first-generation identification device has been invented." Tani didn't say anything and went straight to the point. "Okay, I'll be right there." After hanging up the phone, Rog opened the portal connected to Tani's office and directly walked in. At this time, a lot of members of the Alliance gathered in Tani's office. Rogers, Natasha, Hawkeye, Hallucination, Colonel Road. Obviously, Tony had also called back all the American team members who were out on the mission. However, Rog didn't see Hulk. "Where's Hulk?" Roger nodded at Natasha and Scott, then asked, "What's the matter?" "He's practicing the new move you taught him in the training room. He hasn't left the training room for many days, and he has no intention of letting Dr. Banner come out." Having said that, Tani looked at Rog with a complicated expression. If it weren't for Hulk's unwillingness to return his body to Dr. Banner, he wouldn't have to do everything by himself. Tani is good in the field of mechanical technology, and biology is not in his research scope. Dr. Banner is the most suitable person to study alien creatures like Skrulls. You have to learn to respect Hulk's choice. If you always force Hulk to do things he doesn't like, he will become more and more rebellious. Rog explained to Hulk. It is precisely because the Alliance always forces Hulk to do things he doesn't like that Hulk has never gotten along with the people of the Alliance. Although Hulk is very powerful, he can't always be used as a weapon and tool. Let's not talk about this for now. Let me introduce you to this instrument to identify Skrulls. After that, Tani pointed to the instrument on the desk, which looked like a thick tablet computer. "Through detailed research on the two Skrulls, I found a way to identify them." Tani picked up the instrument on the desk and pressed the start button. "We can't see through the disguise of the Skrulls with just the naked eye. However, when studying their purple blood, I found that there is some extremely weak special radiation in their blood. After a detailed study of the special frequency of the radiation, I have successfully identified this radiation frequency alone. Since there is a special frequency of radiation, the next thing is very simple. The principle of this identification instrument is similar to a nuclear radiation detector. The only difference is that this instrument can only identify the special radiation in the blood of the Skrulls." After that, Tani handed the instrument in his hand to Rog, then continued, "Through the camera on the instrument, we can identify the special radiation in those people. Red is a normal human from Earth. Purple is a Skrull. Because this is the first-generation version, the detection range is only about 100 meters. Rog picked up the instrument in his hand and operated it briefly, then scanned everyone in the room. Tani's explanation was clear enough, but Rog soon found something wrong. Tani and Captain America's scan result was indeed normal human red. However, when he scanned himself in the illusion, he saw colors other than red and purple. The illusion's scan result was yellow, while his scan result was blue. "What do blue and yellow mean?" Rog asked Tani. "Nothing special. Simply put, you and the illusion emit radiation. As for whether this radiation will affect the people around you, unless you are willing to let me study you in detail, I can't give you a definite answer. Tani said casually. Although Tani said it casually after he finished, Rog found that the eyes of Natasha and the others became a little strange. If it wasn't red, it meant that they weren't normal humans. The illusion is relatively easy to understand. After all, he is a robot with autonomous consciousness. But Rog is different. He is a native of Earth. Rog ignored the strange eyes of Natasha and the others, handed the instrument back to Tani, and began to think quickly in his mind. Is this the aftereffect of practicing chakra? Or is it because of the increase in strength that he began to evolve in the direction of aliens? There are a total of 20 sets of this instrument. Compound and Konoha will share equally, 10 sets on each side. When Rog wondered whether he had begun to evolve in the direction of aliens, Tani asked the staff outside the room to move the remaining 19 sets of identification instruments in. Chapter 422. Although this device can only identify Skrulls within 100 meters, it's undoubtedly a huge improvement compared to searching for Skrulls through data analysis. With this device, Konoha's intelligence department no longer needs to compare the data of suspected targets and analyze whether they've been replaced by Skrulls. Good job. Everyone in the room picked up the device and started operating it, then expressed their approval of Tani's work. Tani may not be the most powerful superhero in the Avengers, but he's definitely the most irreplaceable existence in the Avengers. Without Tani's brain, the Avengers wouldn't have developed to this point. I'll accept the device. But if you have time, you can try to upgrade it. 100 meters is still too small. No problem. Once I develop a new version, I'll inform you as soon as possible. After receiving Tony's reply, Rog opened the portal connecting to his office and returned to Konoha's office with the 10 sets of identifiers that belonged to Konoha. Hinata, arrange for people to send out the device. It's time to give these Skrulls a surprise. Rog said to Hinata. It didn't take long for 2 Konoha staff in black uniforms to come to Rog's office and took out the device on the table. The problem of how to identify Skrulls has been solved. The next step is naturally to capture and kill them. However, Rog still has no plans to take action. Unless Daisy and the others find a super Skrull, he won't do it himself. Capturing ordinary Skrulls is not a challenge for him at all. If he has the time, he might as well clear a few more Kree Empire games. Under Hinata's arrangement, the identification device invented by Tony was quickly sent to Daisy and the others who were acting outside. With the device, the efficiency of Konoha and the Avengers' operations has been significantly improved. In just 3 days, the number of captured and killed Skrulls has reached more than 20. The number of suspected names on the list is also decreasing at a considerable speed. Sama, the joint conference will start in half an hour. Hinata woke up Rog, who was addicted to the game. Got it? Although somewhat reluctant, Rog still logged out of the Kree Empire game and took off his helmet. At this time, a week has passed since Tani handed over the device. In this week, Konoha and the Avengers achieved brilliant results. They had captured 36 Skrulls alive and killed 43 Skrulls. Under the joint attack of Konoha and the Avengers, the Skrulls active in Washington and New York were all caught in one net. Even the Skrulls who disguised themselves as government workers weren't spared from the attack. In the beginning, the White House and military expressed their dissatisfaction with Konoha and the Avengers. But when they received the corpses of Skrulls, they obediently shut up. Because of the Skrulls with the Skrulls to kill Konoha. Even the suggestion of a joint press conference was tactfully proposed by the White House and the military. But even if they didn't mention it, Tani had already decided to hold a press conference. In the past 6 months, the Avengers had taken the blame many times, and the support of the public has reached an all-time low. Now that there is sufficient evidence, it's time to wash away the slander. Rog didn't have any objection to Tani's decision to hold a press conference. But on the issue of how to deal with the captured Skrulls, they had different opinions. Tani's idea was to show the Skrulls who were still alive at the press conference, put the witnesses in front of the public, and then lock them up in a secret prison. Tani's idea wasn't wrong. After all, in the UA, some states didn't even have the death penalty. And this approach was in line with the humanism that the UA has always promoted. However, Rog had a different view on this. Showing the existence of the Skrulls to the public was no problem. After the Battle of New York, people all over the world knew that there were other intelligent life forms in the universe. Since there were the Zetarii, it wasn't strange to have another Skrull. What really caused them to have different opinions was the decision of whether to lock up the Skrulls. Tani was more inclined to lock up the Skrulls, while Rog was more inclined to kill them. If they kept the Skrulls alive, who knew what would happen in the future? It was better to just kill them. Neither of them could convince the other, so the joint press conference was held. The Skrulls would be displayed at the press conference. At the same time, they would announce a 3-day secret voting campaign on the spot. Any UA citizen with legal status could log on to a special website to vote. The results of the voting would determine the fate of the Skrulls. At 1 o'clock in the afternoon, at the Avengers headquarters in the suburbs of New York, the joint press conference was held on time. Tani was the main speaker of the press conference. He stood on the stage and introduced the Skrulls' abilities in detail, as well as the dangers they brought. However, even when he asked the staff to bring a few Skrulls who hadn't transformed onto the stage, the reporters didn't have much of a reaction. Looking at the somewhat deserted scene, Tani seemed to have realized something. Once the impression was bad, it was difficult to recover. Even if people knew that the Skrulls had disguised themselves to frame the superheroes, they wouldn't change their opinion. Because once they changed their opinion, it meant that they had to admit that they were stupid and that they had done wrong. It was similar to the king's new clothes. Although they knew it was the truth, they would never admit it. Before the press conference started, Rog expected this. But he didn't remind Tani. Instead, he wanted to let Tani experience it himself. Although Tani had experienced some pain, he still overestimated human nature. As Rog expected, the climax of the press conference came when Tani announced the voting to decide the fate of the Skrulls. What right do the Avengers and Konoha have to decide the fate of the Skrulls? Although they are aliens, they are also living beings. Even if there is a trial, they can only be tried through the law. Although the Skrulls have the ability to transform, you don't have enough evidence to prove it. The so-called evidence you provided is only your side of the story. The reporters in the audience said one after another, directly targeting the Avengers and Konoha. The reporters who were not interested in Tani's evidence now stood on the moral high ground and began to refute with righteous words. Looking at the suddenly agitated reporters, Tani was stunned. Then he looked at Rog, who was sitting on his right. Chapter 423. Looking at Tani's pleading eyes, Rog suddenly missed the Tani before he became Iron Man. Although Tani didn't know him at that time, he had seen a lot of news reports and live broadcasts about Tani. The arrogant genius and playboy from back then was completely gone. It had to be said that the identity of a superhero could really change a person. If it was the Tani from back then, he would never have shown such pleading eyes, let alone be speechless by the reporters' questions. After silently lamenting in his heart, Rog stood up and came to the podium. There was no need for any verbal communication. When Rog came over, Tani immediately gave up his position and sat in his seat without saying a word. When the person standing on the podium became Rog, the sharp questions from the audience instantly disappeared without a trace. A person's name, a tree's shadow. The reporters in the audience may not have dealt with Rog before, but they must have seen Rog's arrogant public declaration. "I will answer your questions just now," Rog said in a calm tone. His eyes slowly swept over every reporter in the audience. Although he hadn't done anything yet, the moment his eyes swept over them, all the reporters in the audience felt an inexplicable chill. However, as reporters, they showed excellent professionalism and didn't show any signs of losing their composure. This was a live broadcast. If they lost their composure, even if their careers weren't ruined, they would at least go down the drain. "Actually, I can answer all your questions with one sentence. We are not discussing with you how to deal with these Skrulls, we are just informing you. It doesn't matter if you're willing or not, or if you acknowledge it or not, the fate of these Skrulls is only imprisonment for life or death. You only have the right to vote or not, you have no right to raise any objections. If you want to show your benevolence, go to this website and vote. Do you understand?" Rog's tone was neither cold nor stern. However, everyone could hear the undeniable tone in his words. After that, Rog gestured to the staff below the stage to project the voting page onto the huge screen on the stage. At this time, the statistics below the death and life imprisonment options were still 0. The reason why it was still 0 was not because no one in the United States had voted, but because the voting had not even begun. "Now, I announce that the voting for the punishment of the Skrulls has officially begun." As Rog's voice sounded, the 72-hour countdown at the top of the voting page began to roll. A few seconds after Rog announced the start of the voting, the statistics on the page began to rise crazily. 1,000, 5,000, 10,000, 30,000, 50,000. Looking at the increasing numbers on the page, the reporters sitting in the audience fell silent. Just as Rog had said, they had no right to make any suggestions or objections. The crazy numbers on the voting page proved an incomparably cruel fact. That is, not many people cared whether Konoha and the Avengers' decision was legal or not. In other words, those who voted tacitly agreed that Konoha and the Avengers had the right to do so. With the official start of the voting, the scheduled process of the press conference was all over. However, Rog did not leave the stage at this time but continued, "Perhaps even now, some people still don't believe that the previous accidents were caused by the Skrulls, but it doesn't matter because the evidence you want is now in front of you." All cameramen aimed the camera at the door. Not to mention the reporters and cameramen at the scene, even Tani and Daisy didn't understand Rog's words. However, they soon knew the reason. The venue of the press conference was on the grass next to the Avengers headquarters, only a few dozen meters away from the door. After hearing Rog's words, everyone at the scene turned to look at the door. Then they saw a large group of superheroes. Iron Man wearing an Iron Man armor, Captain America holding a shield, Hulk with a tall figure, Hawkeye with a bow and arrow. Of course, among these superheroes, there were also no faces of Konoha members. Punisher, Abomination, Shockwave Woman, Quicksilver, Red Tank. Among these superheroes, except for Yondaime Hokage and Thor, the faces of Konoha and the Avengers who have publicly appeared and performed missions outside were basically all there. Did you know this would happen? Looking at the superheroes, who suddenly arrived on the opposite side, Tani asked Rog, "Isn't this a normal thing? If Rogers and the others were tried in public on other planets, you would definitely take people to rescue them." Rog answered calmly. When Tani proposed a huge press conference, he guessed this. What's more, they also made a special advance notice. "Why didn't you say it earlier? We weren't ready to fight at all," Tani complained. "No, it's just that you weren't ready. Konoha was ready early in the morning. We will stop them first. You are responsible for evacuating the crowd and sending these people to a safe place." After that, Rog summoned his Haori and Kusanagi sword. Tani wanted to continue to say something, but when he saw that Konoha's people had rushed up, he could only silently accept Rog's arrangement. "This is also an opportunity for us, an opportunity to catch them all in one fell swoop." As soon as his voice fell, Rog's figure disappeared on the stage, leaving only a finger-thick light blue electric snake. Lightning body flicker. Using the lightning body flicker, Rog came from the stage to the door in an instant, and the Kusanagi sword in his hand was wrapped in light blue lightning. Without any hesitation, the Kusanagi sword in his hand directly stabbed the nearest Hawkeye. Whoosh! The Kusanagi sword wrapped in lightning cut through the Hawkeye's neck like cutting through a cream cake, instantly beheading him. Byakugan, open. When the head of the Hawkeye flew, Rog opened the Byakugan at the same time, increasing his vision to the level of cheating. When Rog took the lead to kill the Hawkeye, the other Konoha's people also launched their own attacks. Chapter 424. Daisy, Quicksilver, and the Punisher, who came to the press conference with Rog, immediately targeted their pirated versions. The shockwave from Daisy's palms directly sent her pirated versions flying. Quicksilver, on the other hand, played a racing game with his pirated version. As for the Punisher, his attack was the simplest and most violent. He directly pulled out the pistol at his waist and madly shot his pirated versions. Although Daisy and the others first entangled their pirated versions, there were more than a few pirated heroes present at this time. Just as these pirated heroes planned to join forces to deal with Daisy and the others, two terrifying figures fell from the sky like meteorites, smashing two huge craters on the grass. Abomination and the Red Tank appeared. Because the two of them were too big, Rog didn't bring them to the press conference, but arranged them in the Quinjet. The domineering appearance of Abomination and the Red Tank immediately attracted the attention of these pirated heroes, and also disrupted their plan to besiege Daisy and the others. Following Abomination and the Red Tank were Blackie and Venom, whose appearance was 95% similar. Like Abomination and the Red Tank, they were also arranged in the Quinjet by Rog. Following Blackie and Venom was Moonlight Stone, who was wearing a gold and white uniform. Although she was the last to appear, the way she appeared was the most eye-catching. Moonlight Stone herself hadn't flown to the scene yet, but the energy shockwave she fired had already arrived in the crowd of pirated heroes. Boom! Boom! A huge explosion suddenly sounded, and the shockwave of the explosion directly blew away the smaller pirated heroes. Except for Dr. Lizard and Walter, all of Konoha's main forces were present. As for the special forces and the Umbu, Rog didn't give them any tasks, but let them stay in Konoha's headquarters. Today's battle was a battle between the original and the pirated version. Although the Skrull side had the advantage in numbers, the Punisher and the others relied on their own strength to make up for the disadvantage in numbers. The Skrull's transformation ability was indeed very good, and the abilities they created with their technology were indeed very realistic. But pirated versions were always pirated versions. In front of the original Punisher, these pirated versions had no advantage except for the advantage in numbers. While Konoha's people entangled these pirated heroes, the Avengers didn't stay idle and quickly evacuated the reporters and other innocent people present. Just as Tani and the others were evacuating the crowd, a tall green figure came to their side. The person who appeared was none other than Hulk, who practiced the Hashiman Tonka day and night in the training room. "Hulk, you're here, great. Do you see those people who look exactly like us? Go up and beat them up hard," Tani said to Hulk. "What about the others?" Hulk pointed to the people of Konoha. "You don't have to care about them, you just have to beat up those people who are pretending to be the Avengers. You Hulk nodded his head in agreement with Tony's statement. However, Hulk didn't rush directly to the Skrull people as Tani imagined, but instead he took a deep breath in front of him. What does this mean? Is he calming himself down? Because Tani has been busy with the Skrull people, he didn't know what Rog taught Hulk. But in the next second, Tani saw a completely different Hulk from his memory. Gamma energy exuding a strange green light appeared on Hulk's body, as if it was covering him with a layer of energy. Then, just as Tani was about to ask Hulk what was going on, Hulk said very seriously, "Hashiman Tanku, first gate, open, open." As Hulk's voice sounded, the gamma energy on his body became stronger. However, what really shocked Tani was that Hulk was exuding an amazing aura that was completely different from before. In the past, although Hulk was very powerful, he always gave people the feeling that he was crazy and brainless. But now Hulk was exuding a cold-blooded and austere aura like a veteran. What did Rog teach Hulk? The current Hulk looks very dangerous. No, after this matter is over, I must have a good chat with Hulk. Just as Tani was surprised by Hulk's aura, Hulk suddenly disappeared in front of him, leaving behind an afterimage. Then he heard a collision sound like an explosion. After opening the first gate, Hulk lifted the restrictions on his brain and used 100% of his physical strength for the first time. After using all of his physical strength, Hulk showed an amazing speed that far exceeded his previous speed. His whole body was like a train as he crashed into the Skrull people, knocking away the Skrull people who had transformed into him. Before Hulk had even opened the first door, Rog had already sensed his presence. Byakugan's 360-degree vision without blind spots allowed him to clearly see everything that was happening around him. If he wanted to, he could even see through everyone's body. However, he did not do that. Instead, he moved forward as if he was taking a stroll, casually killing Black Widow and Captain America. These Skrulls who had transformed into Black Widow and Captain America were ordinary Skrulls. Although they had tried very hard to imitate the strength of the real Skrulls, in front of Rog, even the real Black Widow and Captain America couldn't hold on for long. At this time, Rog wasn't picking on soft persimmons. Instead, he was trying to clear the battlefield as much as possible so that the next battle would have a bigger stage. After searching for a while, he successfully found the Super Skrull that he had been thinking about for a long time among these counterfeit goods. 3. Among these Skrulls, there were only 3 Super Skrulls who had transformed into Super Skrulls: Hulk, Quicksilver and Shockwave Girl Daisy. Although they were hidden among the ordinary Skrulls, Rog's Byakugan completely saw through their disguise. After killing another Hawkeye, he arrived in front of the Super Skrull who had transformed into Daisy. "Don't think about fishing in troubled waters. I know you're a Super Skrull. Go all out." After cleaning up the insensible trash around him, Rog said to Daisy. After discovering that she had been completely exposed, this Daisy had no intention of continuing to hide. She raised her hand and released a strong shockwave that wasn't much weaker than the real Daisy. Chapter 425. The invisible shockwave created ripples in the air and attacked Rog at an astonishing speed. However, for Rog, who was already used to this kind of shockwave attack, the attack from Daisy was too slow. In the blink of an eye, Rog disappeared from his original position, leaving behind a finger-sized light blue electric snake. Then, his voice sounded behind the fake Daisy. "You're too slow." Following his voice, the Kusanagi sword in his hand stabbed straight at the back of Daisy. Without enough time to dodge, Daisy made a counterattack that was within Rog's expectations. Boom. With himself as the center, he unleashed a 360-degree shockwave without any blind spots. This was both an attack and a defense. Although Daisy had never fought with Rog before, all the Skrulls including him had studied Rog's fighting style in detail. Strength, speed, technique, energy release. In the internal investigation report of the scrolls, most of Rog's fighting attributes could be said to be perfect. This was also the reason why these scrolls had never disguised themselves as Log. With their technology and strength, the Rog that they disguised as was extremely flawed. Even if they used it to fool ordinary people, the Rog that they disguised as was not enough to pass off as the real deal. Therefore, in order to prevent their disguise plan from being exposed, they gave up on the idea of disguising themselves as Rog. However, in Rog's perfect fighting attributes, they discovered a weakness of Rog. To be precise, it could not be considered a weakness. It was just that compared to his other attributes, this attribute was obviously a few levels lower. Constitution. Because he was an Earthling, Rog's constitution was not very outstanding. Not to mention the races in the universe that specialized in constitution. Even compared to some ordinary races in the universe, Earthling's constitution was obviously inferior. Under normal circumstances, Rog's constitution was not particularly strong, but it was enough to be his fatal weakness. However, this deficiency in his physique was made up for by his speed that surpassed that of an ordinary person. When analyzing Rog's fighting videos, the Skrulls discovered that Rog had a preference for close combat. In response to this phenomenon, they developed an effective method to deal with Rog's weak constitution. In close combat they would exchange injury for injury. Although the physiques of the Skrulls aren't that strong compared to the humans of Earth, they still have an advantage. As long as they could severely injure Rog, not to mention exchanging injury for injury, even exchanging life for injury would be worth it. Although Super Skrulls were rare, they weren't like Log where there was only one of them. More importantly, they discovered that Rog played an irreplaceable role in Konoha. Once Rog dies, even if Konoha doesn't immediately fall apart, it will be divided into several different forces. In other words, as long as they succeed in killing Rog, it not only means that they got rid of a very troublesome enemy, but it also means that they have caused irreparable damage to Konoha. In a way, the Skrull people's findings weren't wrong. It's just that there was a small problem, that is, their intelligence was a bit too outdated. Before he became a sage, his constitution was indeed Rog's weakness. At least compared to his other attributes, his physique was only equivalent to a strengthened Earthling. However, with the continuous growth of his sage body, this weakness of his constitution was quickly made up for. Although Rog still had the title of an Earthling, his constitution was not inferior to an Asgard. In fact, his constitution was not worse than the Asgard's, it was even better than most of the Asgards. Before he went to rescue the kidnapped Hulk, his hand-to-hand combat with Thor proved this point. Even if these Skrulls paid a bit of attention to news from the universe, such as his battle with Luonan and Thanos on planet Sokka, these Skrulls wouldn't continue to believe that his physique was a weakness. Facing the shock wave flying at high speed, Rog did not dodge, his body directly flashed with the chakra coat wrapped with lightning. Lightning released chakra mode. In just a moment, Rog covered his whole body with lightning released chakra, covering himself with a layer of chakra coat that was not inferior to steel. The invisible shock wave of the fake Daisy was like a tsunami wave that hit Rog. Then, his chakra coat was stirred up in a circle of ripples. This shock wave that had no blind spots came quickly and left quickly, its power was not small. At the very least, the Skrulls not far from Rog in the fake Daisy, as well as the Abominations and Red Tanks, were all sent flying by the shock wave. However, Rog, who was closest to the fake Daisy, was still standing in his original position. Your reaction is not bad. But it's still too slow. As soon as his voice fell, the Kusanagi sword in Rog's hand drew two silver arcs in the air. Like cutting a watermelon, the Kusanagi sword did not receive any resistance, easily cutting through the fake Daisy's two arms. Her arms were directly cut off. Purple blood spurted out from the wound on the severed arm, as if a faint purple rain was falling. If he wanted, he could directly kill this fake Daisy. However, the fake Daisy's identity as a Super Skrull allowed her to avoid the fate of being directly beheaded. Rog wasn't very interested in the Skrulls' ability to change their appearance. However, he was quite curious about the Super Skrull's ability to copy the target's ability. In order to satisfy his little curiosity, he decided to take these 3 Super Skrulls back to Konoha and study them. After removing the fake Daisy's 2 arms, Rog flashed behind the fake Daisy, his left hand turned into a knife and hit the back of her neck. The sudden heavy blow knocked out the fake Daisy without any suspense. The Skrulls present didn't expect that one of the 3 strongest Super Skrulls among them would be so weak in front of Rog. She couldn't even hold on for more than 10 seconds. Although they found it hard to believe, as members of their race, The nearby bandit heroes immediately rushed forward in an attempt to save the bandit Daisy, who had been knocked out by Rog. However, their speed was still too slow. Just as they took their first step, Rog's left hand grabbed the fake Daisy's collar, and the two disappeared directly. Flying Thor. In order to prevent this super Skrull from bleeding to death, Rog didn't waste any time and directly took her back to Konoha's laboratory. "Hinata, look after this guy, don't let him die." After instructing Hinata, Rog's figure disappeared again. The super Skrull who lost her arms was lying motionless on the dissection table in the laboratory. The humanoid robot in the corner was awakened by Hinata, took bandages, sutures and other tools, and came to the dissection table without saying a word. Chapter 426. Although Hinata didn't know what Rog was going to do to the seriously injured super Skrull, since Rog had ordered her to do so, she would never let this super Skrull die. Under Hinata's control, the three medical robots quickly treated the seriously injured and unconscious super Skrull. After bringing the fake Daisy back to the laboratory at Konoha's headquarters, Rog immediately returned to the Avengers' headquarters. At this time, the Skrull disguised as heroes were still fighting with Konoha and the others. However, the most eye-catching thing now wasn't the members of Konoha or the heroes, but Hulk. After opening the first gate, Hulk lifted the restrictions in his brain and exerted 100% of his physical ability. Now, Hulk is using his actions to prove what it means to be unstoppable. Although only Hulk is participating in the battle on the Avengers side for the time being, he who opened the first gate blocked more than 20 heroes with his own strength. A Black Widow with a punch, a Hawkeye with a kick and a few Ant-Men with a kick. Although the unrelated personnel in the Avengers headquarters have been completely evacuated, the broadcast of the battle has never stopped. Through the live broadcast, countless people saw the battle scene of Hulk killing the heroes crazily. Watching these knockoff heroes die one by one in the hands of Hulk, who was emitting green light all over his body, the audience on the other side of the TV couldn't help but have the same thought. Hulk, the strongest Avenger. After returning to the battlefield, Rog paid a little attention to Hulk's battle for a few seconds, and then focused on the fake Quicksilver, who was competing with the real Quicksilver in speed. This fake Quicksilver is also a super Skrull and is one of the research targets that Rog must bring back to the laboratory. Compared with the battles of others, the battle between the real Quicksilver and the fake Quicksilver seemed a bit ordinary. To be precise, it's not ordinary, but not many people can see the specific situation of their battle. In the eyes of others, the two of them are like two flashing ghosts, constantly appearing in every corner of the battlefield. Lightning body flicker. Without any hesitation, Rog immediately joined the speed competition between the two Quicksilver. Compared with the first time they met, Quicksilver's speed has improved a lot. However, he's not the only one whose speed has improved. Within a few seconds, Rog, who was in the state of lightning body flicker, appeared in front of the two of them. Rog's appearance made the real Quicksilver and the fake Quicksilver stunned. Then a completely different look appeared on their faces. Quicksilver's face, of course, was an expression of excitement. Having competed with Logue in terms of speed, he knew very well what kind of speed Logue possessed. With Rog's help, he was confident that he could solve this problem in a short period of time. Of course, the original Quicksilver was happy to see Roger join, while the counterfeit Quicksilver showed a very dignified look at this time. Speed had always been Logue's forte. Quicksilver was to be very well know this. Just as he was thinking about how to get rid of the joint attack of Rog and Quicksilver, he saw a completely incomprehensible picture. Using lightning body flicker, he instantly appeared in front of the real Quicksilver and the fake Quicksilver. Without any hesitation, Rog made his move. However, his target was not the fake Quicksilver but the real Quicksilver. Did I mistake him for someone else? This thought quickly emerged in the mind of the fake Quicksilver. Even the real Quicksilver showed a puzzled look after seeing Rog's right hand grabbing him like lightning. Rog, who was using Byakugan, certainly wouldn't mistake him for someone else. What he wanted to catch now was the real Quicksilver. In just a moment, Rog's right hand, which was wrapped in chakra and lightning, grabbed Quicksilver's shoulder. Then, his right hand suddenly exerted force and threw Quicksilver, who was running at high speed, out. After doing all this, he turned and chased after the fake Quicksilver. This fake Quicksilver, who was transformed from a super Skrull, could be solved by him alone. Leaving Quicksilver here is a pure waste of combat power. Although Quicksilver didn't know what Rog was planning, he didn't suffer a serious impact after being thrown by Rog. Instead, he fell into the crowd of heroes in a relatively gentle way. Quicksilver wanted to catch up and ask, but the bandit heroes around him helped him put an end to this idea with their actions. At this time, although Rog was far away from the main battlefield, he could still clearly see everything happening on the battlefield with his Byakugan. After confirming that Konoha's people were not in danger for the time being, he focused his attention on the crazy running fake Quicksilver in front of him. Although this fake Quicksilver tried to rejoin the main battlefield, so as to use his super speed to attack Konoha's people. But Rog told him a fact with his own actions, that is, don't even think about it. At this super speed that exceeds the speed of sound, ordinary ninjutsu can't hit the fake Quicksilver at all. After confirming that Konoha's members on the main battlefield were not in danger with his Byakugan, he closed his Byakugan. 3 Tomo Sharingan open. First gate of Hashiman Tanku open. After switching Byakugan to Sharingan, he opened the first gate of Hashiman Tanku at the same time. With the opening of the first gate, his already amazing speed instantly became even more terrifying. He didn't use Hashiman Tanku to directly attack the fake Quicksilver. He had a better way to deal with this fake Quicksilver. After using the Hashiman Tanku, he instantly caught up with Quicksilver in front of him as if he had turned on the nitrogen acceleration of a race car. Sharingan, Golden Bind Genjutsu. When the fake Quicksilver looked at him in shock, Rog used Sharingan Genjutsu on him. The moment he saw Rog's Sharingan, the fake Quicksilver had already realized that something was wrong. However, at this time, there was no way for him to change his fate. Under the state of extreme speed, the fake Quicksilver instantly lost control of his body, and his whole body seemed to be completely solidified. Then his body couldn't move. Under the action of inertia like a rolling bowling ball, he hit the outer wall of a nearby building. Boom. The uncontrollable knockoff Quicksilver crashed through the outer wall of the building, and the whole person rolled into the building in an extremely embarrassing manner. When the fake Quicksilver finally stopped rolling, Rog, who was wrapped in a light blue chakra coat, came in front of him and looked at the scar-covered fake Quicksilver. The second Super Scroll was in his hand. Chapter 427. This guy copied Pietro's super speed. He won't be able to move normally for half an hour. Check his injuries, don't let him die. After you're done, find a room and lock him up. After bringing back the immobile Quicksilver, Rog told Hinata. At this time, on another dissection table in the laboratory, the medical robot was helping the fake Daisy with the final treatment. She copied Daisy's superpower. Don't forget to prepare a room for her. Rog glanced at the fake Daisy on the autopsy table, who had turned back into a Skrull, and continued. Yes, sir. Hinata's gentle voice sounded out of thin air in the laboratory. After instructing Hinata, Rog once again used the Flying Thor and returned to the headquarters. Both the fake Daisy and the fake Quicksilver were in his hands, only the fake Hulk was left. When he returned to the headquarters of the Avengers, the first thing he saw was his last target, the fake Hulk, that was transformed from a Super Skrull. He was being beaten up by the real Hulk who had opened the 8 inner hidden gates. Although he didn't know how a Super Skrull with a body similar to an ordinary person became a huge Hulk. However, after seeing the fight between the real Hulk and the fake Hulk, he had to admit that the fake Hulk perfectly copied some of Hulk's abilities. Resistant to beatings. Especially resistant to beatings. Even in the face of the real Hulk who had opened the Hashiman Tanku, the fake Hulk still showed an extremely tenacious ability to resist all of Hulk's attacks. While Rog was appreciating the violent aesthetic scene of the real Hulk beating the fake Hulk, Tani and the others, who had evacuated all the unrelated personnel and changed their equipment, finally joined the battle. Similar to Konoha's people, Tani and the others first chose their fake versions. For a while, the grassland of the Avengers became lively. 5 or 6 Iron Man in Iron Man armor were fighting in the air, and 3 or 4 identical Captain America were fighting with each other. The graceful Black Widows were fighting in a group, and the Hawkeye were shooting arrows at each other. The War Machine Colonel Rog, Falcon Sam, Ant-Man Scott, and the others were also fighting fiercely with their knockoff versions. The only one who looked more relaxed was Illusion. He didn't know if it was too difficult to imitate Illusion, or for some other reason. Among these heroes, Rog only saw one fake, Illusion. With the addition of the Avengers, the fake heroes who didn't have much advantage, suddenly became more precarious. After a while, Roger, who has activated his Sharingan, began to be unable to distinguish their true identities. But even so, he didn't intend to switch back to Byakugan. The only target he needed to deal with now was the fake Hulk, who was fighting with the real Hulk. As for the other knockoff heroes, they could be dealt with by the real deal. Flying Thor. After sensing the Flying Thor technique on Hulk, Rog directly flashed in front of him and joined forces with him to attack this fake version of Hulk. Taijutsu, monstrous strength. After further development of the Sage body, Rog rarely took the initiative to use monstrous strength. Even when fighting with Ronin on Sokka Planet, he didn't deliberately open taijutsu or monstrous strength. However, at this time, in order to send this fake version of Hulk flying as soon as possible, he directly used monstrous strength. Even one-on-one with the real Hulk who opened the first gate, this fake version of Hulk couldn't gain the upper hand. When Rog also joined the battle, this fake version of Hulk didn't even have a chance to fight back and could only be beaten passively. Although Hulk didn't know why Rog suddenly joined the battle, he had no opinion on Rog's approach. Not only that, he even somewhat liked the feeling of fighting together with Rog. Under the joint attack of Hulk and Rog, this fake version of Hulk only lasted for less than 5 seconds before he was completely sent flying. Just when Hulk was about to chase after him, Rog suddenly stopped him. "Leave him to me, you go deal with the rest." After speaking, Rog didn't wait for Hulk's reply and used lightning body blink to chase after him. Seeing Rog's figure suddenly disappear, Hulk, who was emitting a green glow, stopped in place and thought for a few seconds before taking large strides towards the other Hulks. The situation had developed to this point, the Skrull people had completely lost the initiative in the battle. Right now, not to mention rescuing the imprisoned Skrull people, whether they could even leave this place alive was a problem. Thinking of this fake version of Hulk transformed from a Super Skrull person looked at Rog in front of him with hatred. If it wasn't for Rog, their disguise plan wouldn't have been seen through so quickly. If it wasn't for Rog, their rescue plan wouldn't have ended up in such a situation. All of this was caused by the man in front of him. If it wasn't for him, the Skrull people could definitely turn Earth into their new home planet. In this fake version of Hulk's view, the reason why they couldn't occupy Earth was all Rog's fault. It had to be said that the Skrull people who had already started a space civilization somewhat underestimated Earth. In terms of civilization development, Earth was indeed inferior to those planets that had started a space civilization. However, Earth was truly a monster house. The number of hidden monsters on Earth was more than any other planet in the universe. Even if it wasn't for Rog, their plan to invade Earth would absolutely not succeed. However, at this time, this fake version of Hulk obviously wouldn't think so much. In his mind, there was only one thought, and that was to completely kill Rog. He knew that Rog was very strong, but he wasn't weak either. He was a rare Super Skrull among the Skrull people. He was a Super Skrull who could perfectly imitate Hulk. He was a Super Skrull who survived the full pursuit of the Carry Empire. Just as this fake version of Hulk was about to burst into anger and wanted to prove his strength to Rog, he saw a huge energy ball with a diameter of several meters crazily rotating. Super Jade Rasengan. Rog didn't intend to explain anything to this fake version of Hulk. The only thing he wanted to do now was to get this rare Super Skrull person to Konoha's laboratory as soon as possible, and then carefully study their secrets. Boom. This fake version of Hulk didn't have time to stand up. The Rasengan in Rog's hand fiercely smashed into his body. Then, a huge explosion similar to the explosion of an intercontinental missile occurred. Chapter 428. The huge explosion resounded throughout the headquarters of the Avengers, immediately attracting everyone's attention. When the people of Konoha and the Avengers saw that the explosion was caused by Rog, they chose to ignore it. For Rog, making this kind of shocking explosion was a basic operation, nothing to make a fuss about. But for the Skrulls, Rog's attack was something they couldn't imagine. They couldn't understand how Rog, an Earthling, could have such powerful strength. This kind of strength was even stronger than Ronin, the one who brought indelible painful memories to their race. It has to be said that the intelligence of these Skrulls was not just a little bit behind. In their hearts, Luo Nan, the demon-like manipulator, was defeated by Luo Go. Moreover, it was twice. This once again proved how important it was to understand one's opponent in advance before carrying out certain secret plans that could not be divulged to outsiders. The Okodama Rasengan smashed into the body of the knockoff Hulk. Not only did it completely dispel his thoughts of standing up, but it also made him more intimate with the ground. The green grass had disappeared, and in its place was a large hole with a diameter of nearly 10 meters. The knockoff Hulk who tried to kill Rog was located in the center of the hole. Although the power of the Okodama Rasengan was very strong, it wasn't enough to kill this Super Skrull who transformed into Hulk. However, Rog didn't expect this Okodama Rasengan to be able to deal with this knockoff Hulk. For him, this kind of thing was as simple as breathing. Although casting the Okodama Rasengan required a lot of chakra, right now he didn't lack chakra. When he just crossed over to this world, he yearned for the existence of chakra. And now, with the Rokubi's chakra and the Yonkyubi, he finally felt a little bit of chakra. The reason why Hashirama was able to pacify the chaotic world, in addition to his unreasonable sage body and Mokutan, more importantly, he had chakra in the truest sense. It was also because of this amazing amount of chakra that Hashirama's could catch the Kyuubi's Bijudama with his bare hands. It was also because he had Chattanooga that he could use the heaven-destroying and earth-exterminating immortal technique, would release True Thousand Hands Buddha on top. Although Rog has also developed the sage body to a certain extent, there is still a big gap between him and Hashirama's peak state. If he develops his sage body to the limit, coupled with the complete Kyuubi, he is confident that he can display a more powerful attack than Hashirama at his peak. However, this beautiful future was still a little far away from him. Putting these fantasies that he couldn't do for the time being, Rog once again displayed the Super Jade Rasengan. There was nothing that the Rasengan couldn't solve, and if there was, then he would use another one. Now, Rog intended to once again implement this truth that had been proven countless times. Before the knockoff Hulk, who was lying in the center of the big pit, could get up, the second Super Jade Rasengan had already reached his body. Then, another huge explosion resounded throughout the headquarters of the Avengers. Boom. This time, Rog didn't wait for the flying dust to fall to the ground. His right hand once again condensed the Super Jade Rasengan. Then history repeated itself. Boom. After continuously smashing 5 Super Jade Rasengan on the unlucky knockoff Hulk, Rog finally stopped the idea of making Rasengan and sensed the guy's vital signs. His vitality was not very stable and his strength was very low. However, he was still alive. Since he didn't die, it didn't affect his next plan. Under the gaze of the Skrulls, Rog slowly walked into the big pit that had expanded to more than 20 meters in diameter. Flying Thor. Without any hesitation, Rog brought the unconscious Hulk, who had changed back to his original appearance, back to the laboratory of Konoha's headquarters. This guy replicated Hulk's ability, the others are the same as before. After instructing Hinata, Rog's figure disappeared again. Although the 3 Super Skrulls were in his hands, the battle in the headquarters wasn't over yet. Although he didn't have much of a plan to fight, as the 4th Hokage of Konoha, he couldn't abandon the members of Konoha who were fighting. This was his duty as the leader of Konoha. When Rog returned to the headquarters of the Avengers, the Skrulls who were in the midst of battle couldn't help but reveal looks of fear. The 3 strongest Super Skrulls among them had all been defeated by Log, and none of them had been able to hold on for long. From the beginning of the battle to the present, a total of 5 minutes have passed. However, in this short span of 5 minutes, they had lost their 3 most powerful combatants. This kind of thing, not to mention the Skrulls who were at a disadvantage, even if it happened to Konoha and the Avengers who had the advantage, it would still have a psychological impact on Konoha and the Avengers. The situation is over. Although these Skrulls were still trying to resist the attack of Konoha and the Avengers. However, everyone present, including the onlookers on the other end of the television, could easily see this. After returning to the headquarters, Rog didn't join the battle again. As long as he stood there, it was enough to affect the Skrulls. In addition to Roger, Hulk also closed the 8 inner hidden gates and silently came to Roger's side after dealing with the several counterfeit versions that had been passed off as his own. Hulk didn't have the ability to distinguish between Skrulls, except for his own Super Skrulls. He couldn't recognize which one was authentic and which one was fake. In order to avoid accidentally injuring the people on his side, he also directly withdrew from the battle. Rog and Hulk's withdrawal didn't have much impact on the battle. It didn't take long for these Super Skrulls who were still stubbornly resisting to have plans to retreat. However, even if they want to leave now, it's too late. Moreover, Rog won't give them a chance to leave. Shadow Clone Jutsu. Rog summoned 4 shadow clones that looked exactly like him. Then these 4 shadow clones rushed to the east, west, north and south directions. 4 Violet Flame Formation. When these 4 shadow clones arrived at the predetermined location, they simultaneously cast the 4 Violet Flame Formation. A purple square-shaped barrier rose into the sky, covering the entire headquarters. The 4 Violet Flame Formation is one of the small results of Rog's research in the past 6 months in Konoha's hidden village. He didn't exchange the 4 Violet Flame Formation from the system, but he developed this ninjutsu on his own. Chapter 429. In the beginning, Kuroto planned to develop the 6 Red Yang Formation that was once used by the Jubi's Jinchuriki, Uchiha Obito. The 6 Red Yang Formation is more powerful and has a larger range. However, the difficulty of developing the 6 Red Yang Formation is too high to the point that he can't control it. Therefore, he could only take a step back and study the A-rank barrier ninjutsu for Crimson Yang Formation, which required 4 Kage-level ninjas to cast. However, reality once again gave him a slap in the face. In the end, he could only start from the lowest level of the 4 purple flame formation. Because this is a research activity that he uses to adjust his life during his training period, he didn't care too much about the level of the 4 purple flame formation and focused on studying it. However, because the 4 purple flame formation is a ninjutsu that he developed himself, the 4 purple flame formation is different. Therefore, his version of the 4 purple flame formation is slightly different from the one in the system. Regarding the rectangular barrier with the purple transparent flame, the version that he had researched was no different from the version that the system had provided. The only difference is that he added some of the functions of the 4 red yang formation to his 4 purple flame formation. The 4 violet flame formation was mainly used to prevent enemies from the outside world from entering the barrier, so it was mainly used against enemies from the outside world. Although the 4 purple flame formation can also prevent enemies from leaving the barrier, the difficulty of destroying the 4 purple flame formation from the inside is not very high. In order to make up for this, he added some of the functions of the 4 red yang formation and the 6 red yang formation to his 4 purple flame formation. The 4 red yang formation and the 6 red yang formation can not only prevent external enemies from entering the barrier, but also prevent enemies from escaping. Although Rog didn't mind the level of the 4 purple flame formation, he couldn't tolerate the disadvantage of the 4 purple flame formation in preventing enemies from escaping. Therefore, he modified his 4 violet flame formation so that it could prevent external enemies from entering and internal enemies from escaping. When the 4 purple flame formation cast by Rog's 4 shadow clones was fully formed, the 4 purple flame formation completely lost the possibility of escape. After doing all this, Kuroda could finally enjoy the final battle of the real and fake superheroes with peace of mind. Perhaps the appearance of the 4 purple flame formation aroused the desperation of the 4 purple flame formation. At the very last moment, the Skrulls managed to gain the upper hand for a short period of time. However, their advantage did not last long before it completely disappeared. After their final counterattack failed, the morale of the Sikru people plummeted, and the fighting strength they displayed also plummeted. It didn't take long for the Skrull soldiers to be defeated. At this time, the obvious gap between Konoha and the Fu once again appeared on the battlefield. All the Skrulls who transformed into Konoha's people, without exception, died. Even if they chose to surrender in the end, they still couldn't avoid the fate of death. But the Avengers were different. Apart from the Skrulls who died on the spot, those who chose to surrender all survived. As long as they put down their weapons and change back to their original appearance, the people of the Avengers will not attack them again, nor will they kill them inhumanely like Konoha. Rog didn't say anything about Daisy and the others' actions. To a certain extent, he even approved of what Daisy and the others had done. To cut the weeds, one must dig up the roots. Although Rog did not openly promote this in Konoha, the people of Konoha understood the essence of it very well. After the end of the battle, he directly removed the 4 shadow clones. Without the continuous supply of chakra from the shadow clones, the 4 purple flame formation quickly dissipated in the air. Rog didn't intend to intervene in the matter of cleaning the battlefield. This is the headquarters of the Avengers, it's not his turn to deal with it. As for the Skrulls who were spared by the Avengers, he wasn't particularly worried about their fate. While the Avengers dealt with the surrendered Skrulls, he directly opened the portal back to Konoha's headquarters. When all the people of Konoha passed through the portal, Rog, who was walking at the back, turned to Tani and said, "See you in 3 days." After that, he directly passed through the portal and closed it. Hearing Rog's last words, Tani's face showed a wry smile. 3 days later, the voting will be closed. With Tani's understanding of Rog, if he said this sentence, it means that he knows what the voting results will be in 3 days. You should all take a break for a few days, there shouldn't be anything special to deal with, enjoy your vacation. After saying that, Rog returned to his office with the Flying Thunder God and asked Hinata to inform Dr. Connors to come to his office. In Konoha, only Dr. Connors has enough ability to study the secret of the Super Skrulls. Therefore this task belongs to none other than him. Although Hinata can also do some research and analysis work, in the field of biological research, she is still not as good as Dr. Connors. A few minutes later, Dr. Connors in a white coat came to his office. "I will give you 3 living Super Skrulls, no matter what method you use, I want to know the secret of these Super Skrulls copying the target's abilities. I will ask Hinata to give you the highest research authority, you can use all the resources in Konoha. If you need other help, you can also apply to Hinata at any time." Just a few minutes ago, Dr. Connors was still watching the live broadcast of the battle at the headquarters of the Avengers in his office. He didn't expect that Rog would arrange such an important task for him just after the battle. No problem. I will complete the task. After making a solemn promise to Rog, Dr. Connors left the office with a satisfied smile. In fact, in Rog's mind, the most suitable research candidate is not Dr. Connors, but Tani and Dr. Banner. But unfortunately, neither of them will carry out this kind of research. This kind of research is against their conscience. Looking at the departing figure of Dr. Connors, Rog sighed helplessly, and then began to think about what other scientific research talents are hidden outside. Konoha has no shortage of combat power, but at present, Dr. Connors is the only scientific research talent. At this time he once again thought of Orochimaru, the research fanatic. Otherwise, develop in the direction of Orochimaru and become a ninja who understands science. With more and more alien creatures, Rog appreciated Orochimaru's existence more and more. He can fight, resist, and research. If Orochimaru's paranoid character wasn't so serious, he would definitely be the best choice for the fourth Hokage. Although Rog appreciated Minato very much, this doesn't affect his appreciation of Orochimaru. In his view, Minato and Orochimaru are like two sides of a coin. One represents light and the other represents darkness. Light can warm people's hearts and darkness can also give people strength. Chapter 430. The Skrull attack on the headquarters of the Avengers became the headline without any suspense. Various media outlets reported this in detail, and even the accidents that had long been decided were dug out one by one. While the outside world was crazily discussing the Skrull incident, Tani frowned as he looked at the constantly changing numbers on the voting website. In his imagination, the UA people should be more supportive of the decision to imprison the Skrulls permanently. However, it turned out that he was wrong. It had been less than 24 hours since the voting started. But the results of the voting had already shown a huge gap. The number of people who voted for the death penalty was much higher than the number of people who voted for the permanent imprisonment. As time passed, the gap between the two continued to increase. How could this be? Could it be that I was wrong? Looking at the huge gap in real-time data, Tani fell into deep thought. While Tani was paying attention to the real-time data, Rog, who was sitting in his office, also opened the voting website. However, unlike the frowning Tani, he did not feel the slightest bit surprised when he saw the polarized data, as if he already knew this result. Although Rog did not live in the UA as long as Tani, compared to Tani he was more aware of what the ordinary people were thinking. Tani was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. He lived in a superior environment and received the typical elite education in the UA. Growing up in this environment, even if he had the idea of protecting the people and upholding justice, there was a huge gap between him and the ordinary people. The justice he understood was not necessarily the justice that the ordinary people, who had an absolute advantage in numbers, wanted. Moreover, he neglected a very important point. That was, ordinary people were particularly susceptible to the public's emotions. Simply put, it was easy to follow the crowd and lose the ability to think independently and objectively. For example, as long as a victim of the Skrull incident appeared on the internet, this victim could trigger thousands of ordinary people to vote for the death penalty. Compared to the Skrulls who came from other planets, these ordinary people were more willing to show their kindness to their compatriots who had the same appearance. Therefore, the moment Tani agreed to the voting, Rog knew that the Skrulls were doomed. It turned out that his guess was correct. After a simple look at the voting data, Rog closed the website and put on the Kree Empire game helmet. He recently found a game called Chrysaber 7702 in the Kree Empire's console game library. It was a game with a high score of 9 stars on the Kree Empire's game rating website. Compared to the Skrull's ultimate fate, he was more willing to spend his time pleasing himself. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. Just as Roger was engrossed in clearing Chrysaber 7702, he received a call from Tony. "Bring your Special Forces team." Tony's tone was somewhat gloomy. He didn't wait for Rog's reply and directly hung up the phone. The voting for the Skrulls ended yesterday. Although Tani and the Avengers didn't approve of the final result, they could only choose to accept it. 10 minutes later, Rog brought a 6-man Special Forces team to the Avengers headquarters. The Avengers didn't want to personally end the lives of the Skrulls, so this dirty work naturally fell to Konoha. Rog didn't object to this. The Avengers didn't want to be cruel executioners, but Konoha didn't have such concerns. Even if the Avengers didn't say anything, Rog would have taken the initiative to let Konoha execute the Skrulls. Konoha was different from the Avengers. Konoha didn't need any positive reviews. To some extent, Konoha even took the initiative to develop in the direction that people feared. Reputation and positive reviews were just icing on the cake. Only strength was Konoha's true pursuit. Unlike the previous press conference, the execution process of the Skrulls wasn't broadcasted live. However, at the scene of the execution, there were reporters from various media, as well as some witnesses from the government and the people. The scene of the execution was arranged in a prison in New York. The execution time passed very quickly. It only took less than a minute before it was completely over. It wasn't much different from the previous executions. The only difference was that this time, Konoha's special forces used the blasters that Rog bought from Xander. Did we really do something wrong? Why don't people want to let these Skrulls go? They are clearly no longer harmful. Tani, who drank half a bottle of whiskey alone, said to Rog with a flushed face. After the execution, Tani didn't return to the Avengers headquarters. Instead he took Rog to a bar. Moreover, it was a bar under Rog's name. Although Rog didn't live in New York, he still had a lot of businesses in New York. This bar was one of them. Because he didn't care about making money, after arriving at the bar, Rog directly gave the staff a day off and completely cleared the bar, including the staff. Strictly speaking, you didn't do anything wrong. You're just too idealistic. Unlike Tani, who drank glass after glass of whiskey, Rog just tasted it at a normal speed. Idealistic? Haha, do you think the world really needs us now? Tani continued to ask drunkenly. Whether it needs us or not depends on what you think. At least in my opinion, the world still needs us. Rog wasn't as sentimental as Tani. For him, instead of thinking about these problems, it was better to study how to improve his strength. If you feel lost, I suggest you talk to Dr. Banner. He's a good listener. He may be able to give you some good advice. If you ask me, my suggestion is that you can cultivate some hobbies for yourself to adjust your life. For example, I like to play console games. If you want, I can give you the latest console model of the Carry Empire. Rog gave his own suggestion. Carry Empire? There's such a country on Earth? No, it's an alien country, one of the 3 empires in the universe. When Tani heard the word universe, his eyes suddenly lit up. He then pressed on Rog's shoulder and said very seriously, I want to go to the Carry Empire. Chapter 431. No. Rog refused Tani's proposal without even thinking about it. Although the current timeline has become more and more different from what he remembers, he will never agree to Tani's dangerous request, absolutely not. It is not difficult to send Tani to the Carry Empire. However, it is Tani who is sent out, and it may be Tani Dead Tucker who comes back. Although Tani's Mark Series Iron Man armor is very good, it is also from the point of view of Earth technology. If it is really made, there are many civilizations in the universe that can make similar or even stronger armor. To put it simply, Rog doesn't think that Tani has the strength to travel in the universe. Are you rejecting me? For some reason at this time, the half-drunk Tani suddenly showed the legendary aura of a domineering president and said to Rog in a serious tone. You drank too much, I'll let illusion take you back, and you won't have these thoughts when you wake up. After that, Rog took out the phone and planned to contact Illusion at the Avengers headquarters. However, just as he took out his phone, Tani pressed the button on the watch on his right hand, turning the watch into a mechanical glove. Tani's entire movement is extremely fast, which is completely inconsistent with his current drunken state. When the mechanical glove appeared, Tani decisively grabbed the phone held by Rog. You want to play fighting in front of me? Rog was a little stunned. Just when Tani's right hand with the mechanical glove was about to touch his phone, his wrist suddenly turned, and the phone disappeared like magic. Since you're in such a good mood, I'll play with you. As soon as his voice fell, Rog's right hand grabbed Tani, and he had a close fight with Tani while sitting in a chair. Although his fighting skills were not as good as Rog's, it could be seen that Tani had also put in a lot of effort into fighting. Under Rog's intentional control, Tani, who was wearing the mechanical gloves, managed to withstand dozens of attacks. Then Rog removed the mechanical glove on his right hand. When the mechanical glove was completely removed, Tani finally stopped. Don't be too proud. Let me tell you, I'm currently researching the anti-Rog armor. When the time comes, I'll definitely be able to defeat you. Tani said, unwilling to admit defeat. Anti-Rog armor? After hearing Tani's self-destruction speech, Rog smiled. He didn't doubt Tani's level of invention at all. However, Tani's anti-series armor had always had a tradition of being dismantled. Then we'll talk about it after you finish your research. You're really going back. Glancing at the completely empty bottle in front of Tani, Rog decided to send him directly back to the headquarters. However, just as he was about to use quantum teleportation to bring Tani back to the headquarters, a rainbow-like beam of light fell from the sky, directly penetrating the ceiling of the bar and shrouding Rog and Tani. Asgard's Bifrost. The next second, the Bifrost disappeared. At the same time, Rog and the drunk Tani also disappeared. Asgard in a room in the Golden Palace. Thor, even if you're looking for me, you don't have to be in such a hurry. Can't you wait for me to send him back? Rog rubbed his temples and said helplessly to Thor, who was sitting opposite him. Sorry, I don't know how long you're going to drink. It's urgent, so I can only do this. Thor explained silently, but his explanation was not convincing at all. Urgent? I don't see what's urgent now. After being forcibly pulled to Asgard by the Bifrost, he didn't see any urgent situation in Asgard. Except for the drunk Tani next to him, everything here was exactly the same as he remembered. This is a secret about Asgard's royal family, so not many people know about it. I just learned about it today. Thor's face was a little complicated. After hesitating for a few seconds, he continued, Loki is my brother, you already know this. But you must not know that I have an elder sister, a half-sister. I actually have an elder sister, and she's not adopted like Loki. Since being arranged to deal with government affairs by Odin, Thor has learned what it means to not show his emotions. But now he displayed an extremely incredulous expression. I know. Odin told me about this. Rog replied with a calm face. You know? When did you find out? Why didn't I know? Thor asked with a puzzled face. Odin told me the night of the celebration party when we came back from Warnerheim. After the celebration party, Odin told Rog about the goddess of death, Hel, so he knew about it from the beginning. Even if Odin didn't say it, as a transmigrator with a good memory, he couldn't forget the existence of the goddess of death. Why didn't you tell me? Thor began to be a little unhappy. In his view, this was Rog betraying their friendship. Odin asked me to keep it a secret. If you have any opinions, you can ask him yourself. After hearing Rog's answer, Thor fell silent. Then he continued in a low tone, What did Father tell you? You should be able to say it now. Of course. Then Rog gave a simple explanation of what happened that night. As the father of Asgard's gods, Odin was an extremely responsible king and father. He knew that he would die sooner or later, and at the same time he was also worried that after his death, Thor wouldn't have enough ability to deal with the aftermath. So he prepared a backup plan for Thor in advance. Rog was the backup plan that Odin prepared for Thor. In the beginning, Odin actually didn't have such thoughts. In the end, what made him make this decision was the battle between Rog and the sea god Njord. Odin recognized his strength and potential, so he entrusted him with the task in advance. Of course, this entrustment was still in the verbal stage, and the final entrustment had not been signed yet. The content of the entrustment could be said to be simple, but it could also be said to be complicated. When the goddess of death escaped, help Thor protect Asgard and ensure that Thor wouldn't be killed by Hela. If possible, don't kill Hela when you stop her and let her live. It had to be said that Odin thought very highly of Rog. At that time, he actually thought that he had the strength to defeat Hela. But in fact, until now, Rog still didn't have absolute confidence that he could defeat Hela. While the goddess of death was not one of the 5 gods of creation, she still possessed unfathomable strength. Chapter 432. The goddess of death, Hela, was the greatest contributor to helping Odin conquer the 9 worlds thousands of years ago. Other than being the first child of Odin, the father of gods, and the first princess of Asgard, Hela was also the executioner of Asgard and the owner of Thor's hammer. The Valkyrie army that Odin had sent out to conquer Hela was completely wiped out by Hela, becoming an army that only existed in legends. Of course, Rog had reservations about the Valkyrie army being completely wiped out. Although he did not see the last Valkyrie on planet Soccer, his instincts told him that Valkyrie did not die in Hela's hands. If Odin had not personally taken away Hela's divine power, Hela would definitely be the strongest person in Asgard after Odin. Although Hela was not a match for Odin back then, she had a terrifying talent that even Odin had a headache over. As long as Hela stepped onto Asgard, her power would increase day by day, endless. It was also because of this that Odin had imprisoned Hela on Earth far away from Asgard, so that she could not use Asgard's strengthening to break the seal. Thousands of years ago, Hela had already possessed such terrifying strength. Now she would only be stronger than before. However, there was one thing that Rog did not understand at the moment. From Thor's current appearance, Odin should not be dead yet. Since Odin was not dead, it meant that the seal he had set was still there, and Hela was still imprisoned. Odin, is he okay now? After thinking for a few seconds, he asked Thor. Out of respect for Thor and Odin, he used a more tactful method instead of directly asking if Odin was dead. Father shouldn't be able to hold on for much longer. Seeing the uncontrollable sadness on Thor's face, Rog also fell silent. I'll take you to see Father first. After a few minutes of silence, Thor spoke again. Under Thor's lead, Rog came to Odin's bedroom and saw the sleeping Odin lying on the golden bed, wrapped in a layer of golden energy. Other than Odin, Rog also saw another old face here. He did not know if it was Odin's order or Thor's idea, but Loki, who was imprisoned in the dungeon, was also in the room and stood by Odin's bed. After seeing his arrival, Loki didn't say anything. He just nodded at him. Roger also nodded slightly at Loki, who was silent, as a form of greeting. Then he seriously sized up Odin. From the outside, the current Odin was just sleeping and there was nothing strange. But as long as he was slightly closer to Odin, he could clearly feel the divine power that was constantly emitting from Odin's body. No, this is not the release of divine power. This is the collapse of divine power. As a ninja who usually released energy attacks in battle, Rog could clearly distinguish the difference between the two. The release of energy was the result of active choice. And the collapse of energy was a sign of uncontrollable energy. For a Heavenly Father-level existence like Odin, the uncontrollable collapse of the energy in his body basically meant that his life had come to an end. Since Mother's death, Father's condition has not been good. A few hours ago, Father's divine power suddenly began to collapse and he fainted. We used all the methods we could, but we only managed to wake Father up a little. After waking up, Father told us about Hela's matter, and then asked us to contact you immediately, saying that there is an agreement between you and Father, and that you know how to deal with all of this. Thor said in a low voice. Let's talk about it outside. Seeing Odin, a Heavenly Father existence, gradually approaching death, made Rog, who had always been pursuing power, suddenly have a feeling of impermanence. After leaving Odin's palace, Thor brought Rog and Loki to the meeting hall where he usually worked. What kind of agreement did Father make with you? You can tell us now. Rog had only briefly explained to Thor what Odin had said to him that night, and did not tell Thor the specific details of the agreement. He was now in a dilemma whether to tell Thor the specific details of the agreement. After thinking seriously for a few minutes, he finally made a decision. Odin hopes that I can help you stop Hela and not let Asgard fall into Hela's hands. If possible, he hopes that we can spare Hela's life after defeating her. Rog told him the details of Odin's agreement. What about the reward? Thor, who had already signed several agreements with Rog, was very clear about Rog's work process and immediately asked. After the mission is completed, other than the Tesseract, I can choose any treasure in the palace treasury. Give me the scroll, I'll sign the agreement for Father. Thor did not think that Rog would lie about something like this, so he immediately extended his right hand to Rog. Forget it. There's no need to sign the scroll this time. Even if I return Odin a favor, if he did not rush to Warnerheim, I might not have been able to survive from Njord's hands. When Odin appeared, he still had some strength left. But in the end, it was really hard to say who won and who lost between him and Njord. Give it to me, I don't want Father to leave with an unfulfilled agreement. When Thor spoke, Rog saw a look of pain on his face that he had never seen before. Now Thor is not so much the regent of Asgard, Thor is more like a big boy who is holding back his grief. Looking at Saul's slightly trembling right hand, Rog didn't say anything else. He directly summoned a commission scroll that he hadn't used before. After receiving the commission scroll from Rog, Thor did not hesitate and directly picked up the pen and wrote on the scroll. Soon, a new commission appeared on the system's commission page. Commission content: help Thor and Loki stop Hela from taking Asgard. Commission status: not completed. Commission reward: 350 ninja coins. This commission that should have been signed by Odin eventually became Thor's commission. Because it involves the goddess of death, Thor's commission passed the system's judgment without any suspense, and the system gave the highest commission reward so far. The last commission to rescue Hulk, the system gave a reward of 300 ninja coins. This time, the system directly broke the record of the highest reward. I accept the commission. In fact, regardless of whether the system passed the judgment or not, he would have accepted this commission. Passing the judgment only allowed him to get a higher return. Chapter 433. Although the reward of 350 ninja coins broke the highest record, what really caught Rog's attention was not the reward of ninja coins, but the description in the content of the commission. Records like this, as long as he continues to accept commissions, sooner or later it will be refreshed. The difference is just sooner or later. What attracted his attention now was Loki's name in the commission. Loki, who was imprisoned in the dungeon, appeared in Odin's bedroom and accompanied Odin's bed. And now, Saul had added Loki's name to the list of requests. This also means that Thor really forgave Loki. If Queen Freya didn't die, she would be very relieved to see this scene. After throwing the commission scroll that had completed the mission back into the summon scroll, Rog took a deep breath and directly entered the work state. Now, let's sort out the current situation. First of all, I want to know, is there anyone who knows whether Hela has escaped or not? Hela's current situation is directly related to their next plan. If Hela has escaped, it means that they have completely lost the initiative. After hearing Rog's question, Thor and Loki shook their heads silently. Very good, they know nothing about the enemy's whereabouts. Then do you know the specific location where Odin imprisoned Hela, such as the specific location of the seal's exit? I only know the approximate location of the seal is in Norway. Rog continued to ask. Then Saul and Loki shook their heads at the same time. This is work, I can't be angry, I must not be angry. Then can you tell me, in addition to what I already know, do you have any other information about Hela? Rog controlled his emotions and asked again. Then he saw Thor and Loki shake their heads tacitly. Good job. At this moment, Rog began to doubt whether Thor and Loki really want to protect Asgard. As a ninja with good professional ethics, he knows that at this time he must control his temper, especially now that the commission has just been signed. It's alright, we'll do it step by step. Let's first determine the current state of the seal. If Hela hasn't escaped, we'll think of a way to strengthen the seal. Although the success rate is very low, it's still worth a try. The seal that imprisoned Hela was personally placed by Odin, the Heavenly Father. In terms of strength, they had not reached the level of Heavenly Fathers, so it was unlikely that they could repair or even lay down a seal that was on par with Odin's. However, Rog knew another Heavenly Father level existence. Supreme Wizard Ancient One. As long as Ancient One is willing to make a move, it would not be difficult to make a seal similar to Odin's. I can go to Earth to confirm it. After discovering that they could go to Earth, Loki stood up and said righteously. No, you can't. You are on Kamartaj's blacklist. You are an unwelcome guest. You will only cause more trouble if you go. Although Thor had forgiven Loki, Rog had always been on guard against him. The name of the god of trickery was not for nothing. If he let Loki check the seal, Rog was afraid that he would see him in Hela's camp. Let me go to the seal. I happen to know some top people in the field of magic. I can find the specific location of the seal as soon as possible. After thinking about it, Rog decided to make a trip himself. I will ask Heimdall to pay more attention to the situation of the nearby star fields and the 9 worlds to prevent Hela from secretly entering Asgard. After Rog finished speaking, Thor immediately said. Hela was very strong, otherwise Odin would not have helped Thor prepare a backup plan in advance. In order to prevent the already troublesome Hela from becoming even more troublesome, it was necessary to prevent her from setting foot on Asgard as much as possible. If Hela secretly entered Asgard and cultivated for a period of time, even if the 3 of them were tied together, they might not be Hela's opponent. Of course, with Hela's arrogant personality, she might not choose to sneak in secretly. Thousands of years ago, Hela dared to fight Odin head-on. After knowing that Odin was about to die, she would be even more unscrupulous. Loki, go to the royal library and see if you can find any records about Hela. I want to know what Hela did back then. Thor did not forget to arrange a mission for Loki. This was also hinting that Loki should not have any thoughts of leaving Asgard. You are the regent. You have the final say. As long as Thor did not inherit the throne, he could not be considered the king of Asgard. Furthermore, Loki might not give up his desire for the throne. Then let's split up first. If anything happens, let Heimdall contact me at any time. After saying that, Rog opened the portal connected to Kamartaj and left Asgard. He didn't know why, but when he set foot on the land of Kamartaj, he suddenly found that he seemed to have forgotten something. However, this doubt was quickly thrown to the back of his mind. It shouldn't be anything particularly important, so it's fine to forget it. In the reception hall, Rog saw the long-lost sorcerer Supreme Ancient One. Teacher. In front of Ancient One, Rog said respectfully. In front of others, he may appear very strong, but Ancient One is definitely not one of them. What's the trouble? Ancient One, who was making tea, looked up at Rog and asked in a calm tone. Teacher, you should know the father of all gods, Odin, right? He had a rebellious eldest daughter, and in order to discipline her, he sealed his eldest daughter somewhere in Norway. Odin's divine power has already begun to dissipate. I hope that teacher can help find the seal he left behind in Norway. Originally, I shouldn't bother you with this matter, but as you know, I only know a few spells, so, after taking the tea that Ancient One had just brewed, Rog quickly said the purpose of his visit. You're talking about the goddess of death, Hela. You're late, she left Earth an hour ago. After hearing Ancient One's words, Rog almost spat out the tea in his mouth. How can it be so coincidental? No, how can Ancient One let Hela go so easily? Even Loki can be on Kamartaj's blacklist. Now that the goddess of death is free, how can Kamartaj still be so calm? This is not Kamartaj. Teacher, do you know where she went? Rog asked unwillingly. Kamartaj won't intervene in things outside Earth, you should know that. Ancient One took a sip of the freshly brewed tea and said calmly. Well, this is really Kamartaj's style. As long as Hela doesn't make waves on Earth, Ancient One won't do anything to her. Chapter 434. Jotunheim, the Kingdom of the Frost Giants. On the deathly silent ice field, a figure was slowly moving forward in the freezing cold wind. This person in black and green tight clothes was none other than the goddess of death, Hel, who had just gotten rid of Odin's seal. After getting rid of the seal, Hel did not return directly to Asgard, but through a secret space channel hidden on Earth, she came to Jotunheim, the hometown of the Frost Giants. Although Hel got rid of Odin's seal and regained her freedom, but the seal imposed by the Heavenly Father-level existence was not so easy to break. In order to leave the cage that had imprisoned her for thousands of years, she almost consumed all the death power in her body. She knew that Odin was not really dead yet, and she also knew that her current state was not suitable for returning to Asgard. So, she came to Jotunheim, planning to restore some strength here, and then return to Asgard that she had been dreaming of for thousands of years. In the beginning, going to Jotunheim was not in her plan. However, the moment she successfully broke through the seal, she saw a bald woman in an orange-yellow mage robe. Sorcerer Supreme Ancient One. As soon as Hel, the goddess of death, escaped, she met Ancient One, who was at the Heavenly Father level like Odin. Under the friendly advice of Ancient One, Hel decisively gave up the idea of restoring her strength on Earth and left Earth for the first time. The ubiquitous cold wind continued to blow towards Hel, who was slowly moving forward, blowing her slightly messy long black hair. Because of excessive consumption of divine power, the clothes on her body, which were like tight clothes, were torn everywhere, revealing the white skin under the clothes. In terms of age, Hel, who had lived for nearly 3,000 years, was an old woman. But in terms of appearance, Hel was no different from a middle-aged woman in her 40s. Strictly speaking, there wasn't much of a difference. At least, the innate aura of a queen on Hel was not something that ordinary people could have. Under the cold wind, Hel walked step by step towards the end of the ice field. Although she was not a frost giant, the cold wind, which was tens of degrees below zero, did not affect her at all. It even made her feel a little warm. Compared with the underworld where she was imprisoned, the harsh environment of Jotunheim was no different from a beautiful paradise. Hela was going to meet an old friend who had once submitted to Asgard. Frost giant Laufey. Back then, when she was fighting with Odin in the Nine Worlds, Hela had dealt with Laufey quite a bit. In her memory, Laufey was one of the few frost giants with developed limbs who had enough intelligence. However, when she dealt with Laufey, Laufey was not the frost giant king yet. At that time, the one sitting on the throne was Laufey's father. But at this moment, she would never have thought that Laufey had died in the hands of her own son a few years ago. When Hela, who was wearing thin and tattered clothes, continued to move forward on the ice plains, a few storm giants hiding in the cold wind noticed her. Although Jotunheim was the kingdom of the frost giants, there were also storm giants, mountain giants, and other giants here. However, the frost giants had the absolute advantage, so Jotunheim became the kingdom of the frost giants. These storm giants hiding in the cold wind immediately noticed Hela's existence and confirmed her identity as a member of the Asgard god race. Whether it was the frost giants or the storm giants, they did not have a good impression of the Asgard god race. Therefore, these storm giants decisively chose to attack, intending to have a taste of the Asgard god race. However, these storm giants would never have thought that Hela, who seemed extremely weak to them, actually had strength far beyond their imagination. Just as they appeared and were about to say a few harsh words to Hela while enjoying the look of fear on her face, Hela slowly raised her right hand, and a ghostly green flame filled with the power of death appeared in her palm. Before these storm giants could react, The green flames in Hela's hands had already appeared in front of them and started to burn their invisible storm bodies. In just a short 1 or 2 seconds, the dark green flame burned the storm giants' bodies to ashes. Under the entanglement of the dark green flame, 3 irregular green crystal-like crystals floated to Hela's right hand. Without hesitation, Hela directly crushed the green crystal in her hand and absorbed the soul energy contained in it into her body. With the influx of soul energy, the hole in Hela's clothes was rapidly repaired at a speed visible to the naked eye. All the soul energy of the 3 storm giants only repaired the smallest hole in Hela's clothes. After doing all this, Hela continued to walk into the distance. The soul energy of the 3 storm giants could only restore this insignificant amount of strength to Hela, who was only half a step away from the Divine Father level. However, she did not care too much about this. Although Jotunheim was a barren country where not even a blade of grass grew, there were an astonishing number of frost giants here. With these frost giants, she did not have to worry about recovering her strength at all. After learning the news of Hela's escape from Ancient One, Rog did not stay in Kamartaj for too long and directly used teleportation magic to return to Asgard. When he returned to the magnificent Golden Palace again, he finally remembered what he had just forgotten. Tani. The drunk Tani had just been forgotten in the Golden Palace. However, this matter was quickly resolved perfectly, and even Tani himself did not notice. Under Saul's arrangement, the drunk Tony was brought to an extremely luxurious room by a few pretty maids with good temperament and appearance. As for what would happen next, Rog was not very concerned. Having lived in Asgard for a period of time, he was very relieved to leave Tani to these professional maids. Hela has escaped and she has also left Earth. In the meeting hall where Thor usually worked, Rog told him the news he had received. I will let Heimdall do his best to find Hela's whereabouts, but now, I have a small matter here that I need your help to deal with. After that, Thor handed a top-secret letter that had just been opened to Rog. Although the wax seal on the letter had already been opened, he could still recognize the pattern on the wax seal at a glance. After all, in the process of going to Warnerheim, he had received many similar letters. Chapter 435. This was an urgent confidential military document from Warnerheim's frontline camp. The content was very simple, there was only one sentence. Half an hour ago, Warner Protoss attacked 3 frontline camps at the same time. After reading the contents of the document, Rog frowned slightly. This wasn't right, it was very wrong. It had only been a few years since the last war. If Warner Protoss didn't know something, they definitely wouldn't start another war at this time. And the timing couldn't be so coincidental. It seems that Asgard's confidentiality needs to be strengthened. After handing the letter back to Thor, Rog said quietly, I've already blocked the news as soon as possible, but it's impossible to completely hide the fact that Father's divine power has dissipated. As long as you have enough strength and are familiar with Father's divine power, you can detect this. As Asgard's archenemy, Warner Protoss didn't lack such people. Ocean god Njord and Gulwig both had this ability. From the looks of it, you want me to go to Vanaheim. If it wasn't for him going, Thor wouldn't have shown him the document. At this time I can't leave Asgard. It's not a problem to let Loki be the commander in the rear, but he's not strong enough. He can't compete with the strong Warner Protoss. You fought with Warner Protoss before, and the soldiers in the camp also recognize you. Even if Ocean god Njord personally makes a move, you're strong enough to compete with him. Thor quickly explained. Although Asgard was a martial artist, there were very few people who could cultivate to Rog's level. Besides himself, Thor couldn't think of anyone more suitable than Rog. It's not a problem to let me go to Warnerheim, but I want to know, what's your psychological bottom line this time? When he only had the second last chakra, he dared to fight Ocean god Njord one-on-one. Now that he had the 6-tailed chakra and Yang 9-tailed, he was even less afraid of Njord. There's no bottom line. Thor's answer was simple, but Rog could hear the uncontrollable killing intent in his answer. Odin's divine power had just begun to dissipate, and Warner Protoss couldn't help but start a war again. This was a naked provocation. In this situation, if Thor still tried to solve the problem with mercy, then he wouldn't be worthy of inheriting Asgard's throne. A qualified monarch must have a benevolent heart. But that also depended on the time. Blindly paying attention to benevolence was not the ruler of a country, but a brainless saint. Alright, I'll help you with this. If Thor asked him to spare the lives of Warner Protoss soldiers as much as possible like last time, then he definitely wouldn't accept Thor's request this time. The mission he accepted was only to stop Hela from seizing Asgard, not to help Asgard maintain his rule. More importantly, he didn't want to be friends with a coward who couldn't see the situation clearly. "If you need any help you can tell Sif. I'll let her go with you," Thor continued. "No need, I'll go alone." Rog directly rejected Thor's suggestion of arranging helpers for him. "By the way, if you really want to help me, arrange a comfortable trip for Tani to Asgard and fulfill his wish of traveling to outer space." After saying that, he left the meeting hall without looking back and used quantum teleportation to arrive at the Bifrost Hall. "I'm going to Warnerheim's camp, the one with the most intense battle right now." According to the secret report, Warner Protoss had only started attacking the camp half an hour ago. As long as the Asgard garrison in the camp wasn't too trashy, the camp shouldn't have been completely overrun yet. "Okay." Heimdall didn't hesitate and directly inserted the Guardian Sword in his hand into the console in the middle of the hall. Then the entrance of the Bifrost Bridge shone with a gorgeous rainbow light. The next second, Rog, who was standing at the entrance of the Bifrost Bridge, disappeared and followed the teleportation beam to Warnerheim. The teleportation process didn't take too long. In less than a minute, Rog and the Bifrost Bridge arrived at Warnerheim. When the brilliant light disappeared, he saw a bustling campsite. Looking at the camp full of corpses, arrows and energy beams flying everywhere, Rog remembered the scene when he first came to Warnerheim. At that time, a similar scene appeared in front of him. But that time he didn't come through the Bifrost Bridge and he didn't come alone. At that time he had Thor, the 3 warriors of Sengoku, and an entire Asgard army by his side. But now he was alone. When the Bifrost Bridge arrived at the camp, whether it was the soldiers of Asgard or the soldiers of Warner Protoss, they couldn't help but look in the direction of the Bifrost Bridge. Then they saw Rog alone. Only one person. After seeing this scene, the soldiers of Asgard and the soldiers of Warner Protoss had the same question in their minds. Then they saw an even more incomprehensible scene. They saw Rog psychically summon the Yondaime Hokage's Haori and the Thor Kunai, and then he put them on as if he didn't see the fierce battle around him. The last time he came, he wore Madara's armor and imitated Madara's battle. This time he planned to imitate the Yondaime Hokage Minato. When he completely put on the Haori and the Kunai, the closest soldiers of Warner Protoss tried to attack him. People who can teleport through the Bifrost Bridge at this time are definitely not weak. Asgard and the soldiers of Warner Protoss were very clear about this. Just when the Warner Protoss soldier took the first step, Rog suddenly disappeared in front of their eyes. Body flicker technique. In just a moment, Rog came in front of the soldiers of Warner Protoss, holding the Thor Kunai in his right hand, like the scythe of the Grim Reaper, cutting their throats. Chi. Without any suspense, the Thor Kunai pierced their throats like piercing a piece of white paper. The soldiers of Warner Protoss didn't realize what happened at all, the only thing they felt was the severe pain from their throats. Without waiting for the soldiers of Warner Protoss to fall to the ground, Rog threw the bloody Thor Kunai. The flying thunder god Kunai, which seemed to be thrown out casually, hit the forehead of a Vanna warrior with great precision. After doing all this, his figure disappeared once again. When he reappeared, he was holding 2 clean flying thunder god Kunai in his hands. Chapter 436. Although he intended to imitate Minato, Rog didn't throw out all the flying Thor Kunai at the beginning of the battle like Minato did. He didn't have as many flying Thor Kunai as Minato did. In addition to the 9 flying Thor Kunai made of vibranium that were enchanted by Odin, he only prepared 30 ordinary flying Thor Kunai. If he wants to use these 39 flying Thor Kunai to cover the enemy in the entire camp, he needs to calculate the landing point of each flying Thor Kunai. So before throwing out the flying Thor Kunai, he doesn't mind using these Kunai to deal with some enemies. Rog appeared again like a ghost, and the flying Thor Kunai in his hands once again crossed the necks of several Warner Protoss soldiers. Then just like before, he threw out the flying Thor Kunai in his hands. His throwing skills are comparable to a real Uchiha, so he doesn't need to worry about the landing point of the flying Thor Kunai. After he once again killed several Warner Protoss soldiers, the Asgard soldiers who have been paying attention to him finally remembered something. Rog. He's Rog. In the last war, although he didn't hold any role as a commander, his achievements were more dazzling than any other commander. Even Thor, who was the commander, couldn't be compared with him at that time. At that time, Rog changed Asgard and Warnerheim's view of the Earthlings with his own strength. He let these arrogant Protoss see the strength of the Earthlings. At this time, after witnessing Rog's incredible killing efficiency, these Asgard soldiers finally remembered his identity. When the first Asgard soldier excitedly shouted out Rog's name, one after another eyes gathered on him. Some of these gazes were from Asgard warriors, while others were from Warner Protoss warriors. At this moment they finally understood why the Bifrost only sent one person over. This was because Rog alone was enough to contend against an entire army. Rog noticed the gazes of these people, but he didn't take it to heart and didn't stop what he was doing. Flying Thor kunai were pulled out by him, and Warner Protoss warriors were killed by him one after another. It didn't take long for him to throw out all 39 Flying Thunder God kunai he had on him. When he threw out these Flying Thor kunais, over 100 Warner Protoss were killed by him. After finishing this simple preparation work, he sensed the Flying Thor kunai in every corner of the camp, and his expression became extremely serious. When Minato first used this tactic, he killed 50 Jonin from the rock village at once, thoroughly establishing his high status as a Golden Flash can directly give up the mission without being punished. So Rog also wanted to know how many Warner Protoss warriors he could kill by using the same tactic. At this time, there were more than 1,000 Warner Protoss warriors in the camp. If his operation was subtle enough, he could break Minato's record by a large margin. Looking at Rog, who suddenly stopped, Asgard warriors and Warner Protoss warriors couldn't help but take a few steps back. Although they didn't know why Rog stopped, their intuition told them that Rog was preparing to use a powerful killing move. If not necessary, try to stay away from the area where the high-level combatants are. This was the knowledge they learned in the first class of combat training, and it was also the lesson they learned with blood and tears on the battlefield. Just when they were thinking about what kind of killing move Rog was going to use, Rog's figure disappeared from their eyes again. Wasn't it a powerful killing move? Just as these Asgardian warriors showed a trace of disappointment, they suddenly found that the warriors of the Vannas, who had been attacking them frantically, fell to the ground one by one, as if they had been hit by a fatal curse at the same time, and lost their lives one after another. What's going on? Before these Asgard warriors could react, the Warner Protoss warriors near them became motionless corpses. In addition to those Warner Protoss warriors who temporarily withdrew from the camp because of injuries, all the Warner Protoss warriors in the camp lined up to report to the Grim Reaper in less than a minute. The clamorous battle cries suddenly stopped, and the entire campsite suddenly became incomparably quiet. It was so quiet that it was like a ghost town without any life. Until now, these Asgard warriors still didn't know what was going on. The only scene they saw was these Warner Protoss warriors falling down one by one. Finally, these Asgard warriors saw Rog's figure in the area with the most corpses. Rog, wearing the fourth Hokage Haori, stood motionless in the middle of the corpses, his right hand holding a Flying Thor kunai that was still dripping blood. Around him, there were Warner Protoss warriors who were still alive and kicking a few seconds ago. A breeze gently blew through the camp, slightly blowing away the bloody smell that filled the whole camp, and blew up Rog's Haori. 45 seconds. 1,106 people. This was the final result Rog achieved by imitating Minato. In order to achieve this result, he performed more than 800 Flying Thor moves, consuming more than half of his chakra. This was the craziest use of the Flying Thor since he mastered it. Although he had previously killed 400 people in 10 seconds, he still had the record of killing 400 people. But at that time he and his 32 doppelgangers had worked together to accomplish the feat, but this time he was alone. After this crazy killing, he finally understood why Minato only used this tactic once in his life. In addition to the environmental reasons, more importantly, although this tactic looks extremely overbearing, it's not cost-effective. Yes, it's not cost-effective. Consuming more chakra than the Sanbai, and only killing more than 1,000 enemies, it's not worth it. If it wasn't for imitating Minato, he could have used more efficient and labor-saving tactics. For example, releasing several large-scale ninjutsu to directly clear the battlefield. After calming down a little bit, the chakra still boiling in his body, he used quantum transmission to the nearest Asgard warrior and raised the Flying Thor kunai that was still dripping blood. Ask your commander to arrange for people to collect this weapon from the battlefield, wash it, and send it to your commander's residence. The commander, he died. After hesitating for a few seconds, the Asgard warrior replied with a trembling voice. Then from now on, you are the commander of this camp. After saying that, Rog left without looking back and walked toward the largest barracks in the camp. The largest barracks in the camp is the commander's residence. This is a general rule in the Asgard army. Chapter 437. Asgard has a total of 23 camps in Warnerheim. Camps are divided into 3 levels according to the number of troops stationed and the area under their jurisdiction. The campsite that Logue was in right now was one of the lowest leveled campsites. Among the 23 camps, half of them are level 1 camps with about 1,000 troops stationed there. Level 2 camps have about 2 to 3,000 troops stationed there. And the highest level 3 camp is in Warnerheim. There are a total of 3 camps, each of which has more than 5,000 Asgard soldiers. The 3 camps that were attacked this time are 3 level 1 camps, 12 level 1 camps, 8 level 2 camps, and 3 level 3 camps, a total of more than 40,000 soldiers. After the last war, Asgard didn't increase the number of camps in Warnerheim. They just made up the number of soldiers in the camps, which is considered to be giving face to Warner Protoss. Of course, Asgard didn't forget about the war reparations and the loss of personnel. After arriving at the commander's residence, Rog directly found Asgard's camp distribution map and found the location of the other 2 camps. After confirming the location, he once again used quantum teleportation. Another camp that was attacked, Boulder Camp. Captain, haven't the Golden Palace and the other camp's reinforcements arrived yet? A young Asgard soldier who looked like he just reached adulthood asked the captain next to him. They will come, the reinforcements will definitely come. While answering, the brawny man with a huge scar on his face used the giant axe in his hand to cut down a Warner Protoss soldier who tried to step forward. Bring it on, you Vanir bastards. My axe is thirsting for blood. After cutting down a Warner Protoss soldier, the brawny captain shouted at the Warner Protoss soldiers in the distance. Captain, you should stop shouting. If you shout a few more times, our defense line won't be able to hold on. Bell, how many times have I told you? You have to show the dominance of the Asgard when facing these Vanir bastards. As soon as he finished speaking, the brawny man with the giant axe took the initiative to rush out. Like a crazy brown bear, he wantonly attacked the surrounding Warner Protoss warriors. Just as the young warrior named Bell was about to rush out with the captain, a brilliant aurora-like light appeared in front of him, stopping him from trying to rush out of the defensive line. When the brilliant light dissipated, Bale saw a person he had only seen in videos and posters. Rog. He was Rog. Unlike the Asgard warriors from the previous camp, Bale recognized Rog at a glance. His face was filled with excitement as if he had met his idol. In a sense, Rog was Bale's idol. In the last war, Bale wasn't part of the Warnerheim garrison, nor was he a member of the Asgard reinforcements. However, after he learned that there was an Earthling named Rog who shone in the battlefield of Warnerheim, he began to pay attention to Rog. At first, he was like the other Asgard people, not believing the battle reports from the front line. But as Rog's battle records increased, he began to collect information about Rog. Through some channels, he bought magic stones with recordings of Rog's battles. Even now, he could still remember clearly how excited he was when he saw Rog fighting the 3 Storm brothers alone and successfully killing them. At that moment, it was as if he saw a living heroic spirit walking out of the Hall of Valhalla, a glorious warrior forever remembered in the glorious history of Asgard. From that day onwards, he became a fanatical fan of Rog. He collected all the magic stones with recordings of Rog's battles that he could find. He even hung a huge poster that was more than 2 meters long in his room. In order to get closer to his idol, he even took the initiative to apply for a transfer from the city defense to the Warnerheim garrison. Although he knew that Rog might never appear on the battlefield of Warnerheim again, this didn't affect his determination to follow in Rog's footsteps. Since he came to Warnerheim, he would go to the places where Rog fought whenever he had a holiday to see the traces left behind by Rog's battles with his own eyes. And now he finally saw his idol. After teleporting to Camp Boulder, Rog wanted to directly join the battle and quickly finish off the Warner Protoss soldiers attacking the camp. But when he felt Bell's strange gaze on him, he turned around with a puzzled expression. At first, he thought it was someone he had dealt with before looking at him. Then he saw the unfamiliar young face of Bale, and the eyes that were not unfamiliar to him. This guy, is he my fan? He had seen Bale's eyes on a lot of young fangirls. Those fanatical fans showed the same look when they saw their idols. He just glanced at Bale, then withdrew his gaze and observed the situation on the battlefield. Compared to the previous camp, Camp Boulder's situation was obviously much better. Not only did Camp Boulder's defense not break, but they were also evenly matched with the Warner Protoss army, which had twice as many soldiers. In terms of individual combat power, Asgard soldiers were stronger than Warner Protoss's soldiers. This was one of the main reasons why Asgard didn't increase the number of troops stationed in Warnerheim. However, this wasn't the only reason why Camp Boulder's defense hadn't been broken. The reason why Camp Boulder's results were so different was because of the command of the camp's commander. They were both level 1 camps and Camp Boulder faced more enemies, but the combat power they displayed was completely different. After a few seconds of observation, Rog had a plan. He didn't need to kill these Warner Protoss soldiers alone, he just needed to give Camp Boulder's garrison a chance to counterattack, and Camp Boulder would be able to defeat the enemy. After discovering this, he didn't hesitate and cast a high-level ninjutsu that could change the terrain. Would release Tree World Descent. He clasped his hands together, and chakra in his body quickly operated, and huge trees that needed several people to wrap their arms around came out of the ground. After a few seconds, a lush forest several times bigger than Camp Boulder was born, shrouding the entire battlefield. Asgard soldiers and Warner Protoss soldiers didn't know the name of this ninjutsu, but they weren't unfamiliar with this ninjutsu. Back when he was fighting the god of the ocean, Niold, Rog had used Tree Realm Descent in his Sage mode. But at that time he used Sage mode, would release Tree World Descent. Asgard soldiers and Warner Protoss soldiers couldn't tell the difference between would release and would release, but they knew that this move belonged to Rog, the same Rog who once injured Njord. When the lush forest created by Tree World Descent descended, Camp Boulder's commander didn't hesitate and directly ordered the entire army to counterattack. If he couldn't even see such an obvious opportunity to counterattack, he wouldn't have been able to rely on his own command to defend the camp so well. All troops attacked. The high and majestic horns sounded, and Asgard soldiers who had been suppressing their anger rushed out of the camp like a pack of wolves. Chapter 438. Rog's Tree World Descent completely changed the situation on the battlefield. At this time, Asgard soldiers turned into deadly hunters, crazily chasing after the Warner Protoss soldiers in the unreasonably lush forest. After using Tree World Descent, Rog didn't immediately choose to leave. Instead, he manipulated the trees in the forest, turning the forest into a hell that the Warner Protoss soldiers could never escape from. Relying on the huge advantage provided by Tree World Descent, Asgard soldiers erupted with strength far beyond their usual, directly pushing the battle into a one-sided situation. When most of Asgard's soldiers crazily rushed into the forest, continuously reaping the lives of the Warner Protoss soldiers, Rog's fanatic Bell still stayed in place. Looking at Rog, who was only 2 or 3 meters away from him, Bell suddenly had an idea in his mind. I have to go up and say hello to him. I have to say something to him face to face. After barely suppressing the uncontrollable excitement in his heart, Bell put away the long sword in his hand and walked step by step toward Rog. Although Rog's main focus was on controlling the trees, he still immediately noticed Bell's action. What does this guy want to do? Just when he was thinking about whether to distance himself from this somewhat abnormal fan, Bell with a nervous expression came in front of him and said in a trembling voice, "Sir Rog, hello. I'm a sword and shield soldier from the 27th Squad of the Boulder Camp. My name is Bell." Looking at the nervous young sword and shield soldier, Rog slightly frowned. After a few seconds of silence, he opened his mouth and said, "Your mission now should be to chase after the enemy, not to come and say hello to me. Do you understand, soldier?" If it was any other time, he wouldn't mind taking a photo or saying hello to his fan. But now it was obviously not the time to do these things. Bale never thought that he would receive such a reply. Although Rog didn't say it explicitly, there was only one meaning in his words, and that was Bell didn't listen to orders and left his post without permission. For a warrior, this was a very serious accusation. If strictly pursued, this could even send Bale directly to the military court. "Lord Raga. I'm not," Bell wanted to explain, but when he saw the increasingly impatient expression on Rog's face, he finally chose to shut up and lowered his head. In the end, Bale, who was hit by reality, turned around with a lonely face and ran towards the forest. "Live well, don't die in Warnerheim," Rog said silently as he looked at Bale, who was obviously not in his right state of mind. He didn't reject young people chasing stars, but he didn't like young people chasing stars regardless of the occasion. Although he was dissatisfied with Bale's untimely behavior, he didn't want to see a young man like Bale die in the forest, so he silently reminded him. After hearing the voice behind him, Bale suddenly stopped. A few seconds later, his lonely mood was replaced by excitement as he ran towards the forest. Bale's sudden episode didn't affect Rog's control of the world of trees. More than 10 minutes later, most of the Warner Protoss soldiers who attacked Camp Boulder were forever left in the forest and became nutrients for the growth of the forest. When the battle at Camp Boulder came to an end, Rog didn't stop and began to rush to the next camp. A brilliant aurora-like light flashed on his body, and in the next second, his figure disappeared with the light. The third camp to be attacked was a camp called Fong. Unlike Camp Maple and Camp Boulder, which were located near the forest and plains, Fang was located on a mountain peak that looked like a beast's fang. It was because of this mountain peak that the camp had the name Fang. Camp Maple was the first camp Rog went to, and it was also the most intense camp with the most losses. Because of the death of the commander, Camp Maple didn't organize an effective defense, and nearly half of the soldiers died at the hands of Warner Protoss soldiers. The situation at Camp Boulder was completely different from Camp Maple. When he used quantum transmission to leave Camp Boulder, Rog slightly sensed the number of soldiers left in Camp Boulder. More than 800 people. Even in the face of twice the number of enemies, Camp Boulder only lost less than 200 people. At the cost of less than 200 deaths, almost all of the invading Warner Protoss soldiers were wiped out. This was a glorious record. Although this exaggerated loss ratio had a lot to do with Rog's world of trees. But no matter what, it couldn't be denied that Camp Boulder's commander's exquisite command and the strength of the camp's soldiers. Among the 3 attacked camps, the situation at Fang was neither good nor bad. The sharp Fang camp's defensive line was not completely breached like the Maple Leaf camps, nor was it completely defended like the Boulder camps. Unlike the last teleportation, Rog didn't teleport directly to the canine camp this time. Instead, he was teleported to a 20-meter tall tree near the camp. He hung upside down on a 10-centimeter thick branch like a bat. After observing the situation in the camp from above, he quickly came up with a plan. In fact, this wasn't a plan, it was just a decision on which ninjutsu to use. Camp Maple suffered the most losses, and what they needed was him to turn the tide and directly defeat the invading enemy. And Camp Boulder, who was in the best situation, needed him to provide a perfect opportunity to counterattack and create an opportunity for Camp Boulder to take the initiative. As for Fang Camp, the help they needed was very simple, and that was to help them make up for their disadvantage in numbers. Although Asgard soldiers were better than Warner Protoss soldiers in terms of individual combat power, their strength hadn't reached the level where they could directly ignore the advantage in numbers. Since Fang Camp needed help in numbers, Rog, as the reinforcements, would naturally fulfill their wish. Rog, who was hanging upside down on the branch, suddenly raised his hands and imitated Naruto's multiple shadow clone jutsu, forming a seal. For him, who can cast ninjutsu without seals, forming seals or not doesn't affect his release of ninjutsu. But sometimes he will release ninjutsu through hand seals like a real ninja. Multiple shadow clone jutsu. Chanting in his heart, Rog's chakra ran wildly. In the next second, thousands of white smoke appeared out of thin air near the camp. When the smoke dissipated, rogues who were either standing or squatting appeared on the battlefield one after another. Multiple shadow clone jutsu and shadow clone jutsu have no difference in principle. As long as the caster has enough chakra, he can create thousands of shadow clones at once. Chapter 439. What kind of experience would it be to suddenly see thousands of people who looked exactly the same in a stalemate on the battlefield? A lot of people wouldn't be able to answer this question. After all, twins were common, but thousands of people who looked exactly the same weren't easy to find. At this time, the Asgard warriors and the Warner Protoss warriors who attacked the camp had the qualifications to answer this question. An incomprehensible miracle. Whether it was the warriors of Asgard or the warriors of the Vanir gods, after seeing these thousands of shadow clones, the same or similar thought came to their minds. Just as the Asgard warriors and the Warner Protoss warriors were looking at these shadow clones in disbelief, these shadow clones tacitly attacked at the same time. When the shadow clones attacked the Warner Protoss warriors who obviously hadn't reacted yet, Rog, who was hanging upside down on the branch, suddenly used the body flicker technique. In the next second he was hanging upside down on another branch. Standing in a normal posture, he silently observed the battle around him. Gathering chakra at his feet allowed him to hang upside down on the branch like a bat, but chakra couldn't change gravity, so hanging upside down for a long time would cause blood to rush to the brain. At first, the Asgard warriors in the camp didn't understand what was going on. But when they saw that the shadow clones only attacked the Warner Protoss warriors and didn't attack them, they instantly reacted. Reinforcements. These are reinforcements. Although these reinforcements were completely different from what they imagined, but no matter what, these thousands of shadow clones were genuine reinforcements. With the addition of the shadow clones, the stalemate situation quickly lost its balance, and the scales of victory quickly tilted towards Asgard's side. Although the shadow clones didn't have strong resistance, as long as they were hit by a sword, they would turn into smoke and disappear. But it wasn't easy to hit these shadow clones. These shadow clones not only had all of Rog's fighting skills, but they could also use ninjutsu like him. Except for the fact that they couldn't use Kekkei Genkai, and those spells and abilities that didn't belong to the ninjutsu system, these shadow clones weren't much different from Rog himself. The only difference was that their resistance was weakened to the extreme. When these shadow clones joined the battle came to an end at a speed visible to the naked eye. In less than 3 minutes, all the Warner Protoss warriors who came to attack fell on this Fang-like mountain peak. When the last Warner Protoss warrior fell down with a face of disbelief, Rog removed most of the shadow clones, leaving only one. However, the remaining shadow clone didn't stay in the camp for too long. It used Flying Thunder God to return to Maple Leaf Camp where it first started. Rog didn't forget that his 38 Flying Thor Kunai were still in the camp. Southeast of the Fang camp, in a temporary camp more than 60 kilometers away. Is there still no news from the troops that attacked the Maple Leaf, Boulder and Fang camps? In the commander's tent, Victigny, wearing a pale golden armor, said in a dissatisfied tone. More than half an hour has passed since the agreed time of attack. According to normal circumstances, the 3 Vanguard troops should have already sent back the battle report. Sir, we haven't received the battle report from the Vanguard troops yet. More than 10 minutes ago, the signal soldier that attacked the Boulder camp sent back an incomplete report. This is all the content of the report. After that, the commander, who was at least twice as old as Victigny, handed over a piece of paper with only a few words written on it. The content on the paper was very simple, only a name and a description. Reinforcements. Rog. From a military point of view, this wasn't a qualified military report. But this didn't prevent Victigny from understanding the meaning. After seeing Rog's name written on it, the serious Victigny suddenly showed a puzzled look. Rog? How could it be him? Of course, Victigny wouldn't forget Rog. After all, this was a man who almost killed her and defeated her. However, at this time she didn't understand why Rog, who had disappeared for several years, suddenly appeared in the Boulder camp. He joined Asgard? This was the first thought that appeared in Victigny's mind. But in the next second she ruled out this speculation. After the end of the last war, she specifically asked people to investigate Rog's background and knew that he coincidentally joined Asgard's army. And if Rog really became a member of Asgard after the war, Warner Protoss's spies would have sent back the information early on. Seeing Victigny looking at the paper in her hand with a puzzled look, Weigelf, who was standing next to her, took the initiative to walk over and took the paper from Victigny's hand. When Weigelf took the paper from her hand, Victigny finally reacted. Then she returned to her previous serious look and said without any emotion, "The 3 Vanguard units in front have failed." Passed down the order, the army immediately returned to Asia. Victigny's order made the other generals in the tent show a puzzled look. Even if the 3 Vanguard units failed, the main force of the army was still there. There was no need to retreat. "My lady, should we reconsider?" After a few seconds of silence, a general tried to probe. "Are you doubting my judgment?" Victigny glanced at the general and said in a cold tone. "This subordinate doesn't dare." In a few seconds, the generals in the tent disappeared completely and began to arrange for the return of the army to Asia. "Sister, if he really comes, what should we do?" Weigelfa's right hand gushed out a light blue energy flame and burned the paper in her hand. "I don't know, I really don't know." Victigny replied with a bitter smile. A few hours ago they had learned from their mother, Gulwig, that Odin's divine power had dissipated. Not long after they learned the news, ocean god Njord gave the order to attack Asgard's camp and appointed the 2 of them as the main generals of the army. Although they didn't think that this was a good time to attack Asgard's camp, they couldn't disobey Njord's order and could only lead the army to set off. Before attacking the camp, they had considered that Asgard would send reinforcements. However, they didn't expect that the reinforcements sent by Asgard would be Rog. Therefore, things suddenly became a little out of control. When Victigny ordered the army to withdraw to Asia, Rog took the clean Thor Kunai from the shadow clone and left the camp alone. Chapter 440. After knowing that Rog was going to attack the main forces of Warner Protoss, the commander of the Fang's camp wanted to lead the troops to go with him. But Rog rejected the proposal. Bringing them along with him would only slow him down. Rog didn't plan to stay in Warnerheim for too long. He had a bigger problem to deal with and didn't have that much time to waste. While waiting for the shadow clone in the Fang's camp, he used chakra to confirm the location of the Warner Protoss army. The Warner Protoss army that attacked the 3 level 1 camps was clearly just the vanguard. If he wanted to calm Warnerheim down again, getting rid of these 3 vanguard forces was far from enough. So he decided to take drastic measures and get rid of the Warner Protoss army more than 60 kilometers away. Only in this way could he completely dispel the thoughts of Warner Protoss that they shouldn't have. The reason why he made this decision was also related to the two familiar life energy signals he sensed. Victigny and Weigelf. He was still thinking about who would lead the Warner Protoss army this time. He didn't expect it to be the Victigny sisters. After considering the strength of the two Victigny sisters, he decisively made the decision to charge into the enemy camp alone. At this time, the Warner Protoss army was making the final preparations to retreat. They planned to retreat to the main city of Asia City behind them. But they didn't expect that they were about to see a nightmare that they couldn't forget until now. In front of the gate of the temporary camp, a gorgeous light suddenly flashed. Then Rog, who was wearing a white Haori, appeared. The Warner Protoss soldiers responsible for guarding the gate of the camp immediately noticed Rog's arrival. But before they could shoot the arrows in their hands, 100-meter-wide orange-red flame arrived in front of them like a tsunami. Fire release, grand fire annihilation. Boom. The orange-red flame that covered the sky fiercely hit the gate of the camp and the wooden fence next to it. In an instant, the gate and the fence were swallowed up. The Warner Protoss soldiers who couldn't dodge in time were instantly wrapped in the flame. They let out miserable screams and died with intense pain and unwillingness. Rog's grand fire annihilation shocked everyone in the camp. He used his own method to announce his arrival. After he announced his arrival in a domineering manner, dark thunderclouds quickly gathered in the sky above the camp. Muffled sounds of thunder could be heard from the thunderclouds. In the next moment, two huge bolts of lightning, several meters wide, struck the ground dozens of meters in front of Rog. After the lightning disappeared, the Victigny sisters appeared in front of him, wearing light golden armor. "We're old friends, I won't waste words. Surrender or die." As soon as his voice fell, the Kusanagi no Tsurugi sword was summoned into his hand, and light blue lightning instantly wrapped around it. "Now you're even more domineering than Odin. If you want us to surrender, then let's see if you have the ability to do so." Looking at the aggressive Rog, Victigny and her sister didn't hesitate and directly pulled out their respective weapons. The sword in Victigny's hand was the two-handed greatsword that she had once lost to Log, the Wrath of the Hurricane. As for the rapier in Weigelf's hand, he never knew the name of it. He never had the interest to know the name of the weapon of his defeated opponent. After Victigny and her sister pulled out their weapons, Rog didn't immediately attack. Instead, he summoned 4 wood clones. The shadow clones' ability to resist attacks was too weak. They would disappear after being hit by a lightning bolt. So when facing Victigny and her sister, the wood clones would be more useful. "I didn't expect that after not seeing you for a few years, you've become a man who bullies others with numbers." After seeing Rog's 4 wood clones, Victigny said with a look of disdain. She had fantasized about fighting Log again more than once, but she had never thought that Log would use such a tactic to bully her with numbers. Bully others with numbers? No, you've misunderstood. These clones are not used to bully others with numbers, but to prevent you from escaping. After all, if tens of thousands of people escape, it's quite troublesome to catch them one by one. As soon as Rog finished speaking, the 4 wood clones beside him disappeared. Not good. He's planning to use a barrier. Before Victigny could react, Weigelf saw through Rog's plan. Weigelf's amazing intuition had left a deep impression on Rog. However, he wasn't worried that Weigelf would see through his plan. As long as he was still standing here, Weigelf wouldn't dare to leave Victigny's side, let alone chase after his wood clones. It didn't take long for his 4 wood clones to come to the designated position and cast barrier ninjutsu. 4 purple flame formation. The 4 purple flame formation that was once performed at the headquarters of the Avengers was once again performed, and the rectangular purple barrier completely enveloped the entire camp. "You're all surrounded by me." When the 4 purple flame formation was formed, Rog also achieved a new achievement. One person surrounded an army of tens of thousands of people. This feeling is very cool. After achieving this achievement, Rog, holding the Kusanagi sword, attacked Victigny and Kagura. His figure suddenly disappeared and appeared in front of Victigny like a flash. The Kusanagi sword in his hand directly slashed at Victigny's delicate face. However, just as he waved the Kusanagi sword in his hand, Weigelf's rapier blocked the Kusanagi sword's attack in advance. At the same time, Victigny's hurricane's fury slashed at him with the power of thunder. Clang! Weigelf's rapier blocked the Kusanagi sword without any suspense, and the crisp sound of metal colliding suddenly sounded. In this regard, Rog didn't have any surprise. Lightning body flicker. With the power of thunder, the hurricane's fury directly crossed the lightning left by Rog's lightning body flicker. Boom. The power of thunder on the hurricane's fury slammed into the ground, leaving a several meters long sword mark on the ground. After dodging the attack of the hurricane's fury, Rog didn't immediately launch a second wave of attacks. Instead, he raised his left hand and slowly stroked the blade of the Kusanagi sword. After seeing Rog's slightly abnormal action, Weigelf, who had amazing intuition, frowned slightly. Her intuition told her that Rog was planning something. However, she couldn't guess what Rog was planning. For her amazing intuition, this was something that had never happened before. No need to guess, although your intuition is amazing, it can even be said to have the effect of foreseeing the future. But unfortunately, your intuition isn't really foreseeing the future, so don't waste your energy. Chapter 441. The first time he fought with Weigelf, Rog found that her intuition was unreasonably accurate. At that time, he purely thought that this was a gift that Vigor was born with, just like the owl that he had met before who was born with divine power. However, as his strength and knowledge continued to grow, he found that he was wrong. Weigelf's amazing intuition was definitely not an external manifestation of divine power. The reason was simple. If Weigelf's amazing intuition was really an external manifestation of divine power, then it meant that she would awaken divine power in the future. It was a divine power related to time, such as predicting the future. However, any power related to time required an extremely high level of power to control. For example, a universal treasure like the time gem. Even the father of gods, Odin, who was a powerful existence at the level of a divine father, could only barely predict the future and slightly touch upon the power of time. And Weigelf did not look like she could surpass Odin in the future. Therefore, Rog could conclude that Weigelf's amazing intuition had nothing to do with the power of time or foresight. After eliminating the ability to foresee the future and the power of time, the only options left were prediction and mind reading. Prediction, mind reading, lightning. After combining these elements, Rog thought of a guy who called himself God. Although this guy was a character from another world, it didn't stop Rog from using him as a sample for his speculations. They both mastered the power of lightning and could predict the opponent's next move. The more he thought, the more Rog felt that he had found the truth. Of course, all of this was just his speculation. In order to prove this speculation, he planned to do a small test on the spot. When Rog's left hand strangely swept across the back of the Kusanagi sword, Weigelf's uneasiness became more and more obvious. She knew what Rog was planning and that the source of danger was the Kusanagi sword in Rog's hand, but she could not guess what Rog wanted to do with the Kusanagi sword. The only thing she could be sure of was that Rog would continue to attack with the Kusanagi sword. Without waiting for Weigelf to continue thinking, Rog launched another attack. This time he did not choose Vigtigny as his target. Instead he went straight for Weigelf. In the blink of an eye, he traversed tens of meters and arrived in front of Weigelf. He instinctively struck with his Kusanagi sword. Clang, clang, clang. The Kusanagi sword in Roger's hand was like a storm as it rained down on Weigelf, but Weigelf blocked it one by one. But even so, Rog didn't stop attacking. Even when Vigtigny attacked him with her Wrath of the Hurricane, he only dodged slightly before attacking Weigelf again. It wasn't the first time that Weigelf and Vigtigny fought with Rog, but they had never seen Rog like this. At this time, Rog was like a ruthless sword-wielding machine, crazily waving his Kusanagi sword. Although Rog's attacks were as dense as a storm, he never hit Weigelf. No matter how subtle his moves were, no matter how tricky his attack angle was, Weigelf's rapier was always able to block his Kusanagi sword. In just 10 seconds, Rog waved his sword hundreds of times at Weigelf. And then nothing. When Vigtigny couldn't help but use a large-scale lightning attack to force Rog back and prevent him from continuing to attack Weigelf, Rog took the initiative to give up the attack and quickly retreated, once again increasing the distance between them. After putting enough distance between them, Rog didn't do anything. Instead, he started counting down silently. 2, 1. At the moment when his countdown ended, Weigelf's rapier suddenly burst out a weak electric current, directly hitting Weigelf's right hand that was holding the rapier. It actually worked. For Weigelf, who has mastered the power of lightning, this sudden burst of electric current was nothing. It didn't even leave an obvious mark on her skin. But after being hit by this electric current, Weigelf's face showed a look of disbelief. How is this possible? When did he leave this electric current? Are you surprised to find that the intuition you are so proud of has failed? Unlike the shocked Weigelf, Rog was a bit calm at this time. When did you do it? Why didn't I notice it at all? Weigelf asked with a dignified face. It's normal that you didn't notice it because I didn't know when this electric current was passed. Rog was telling the truth, he really didn't know when this electric current appeared on Weigelf's rapier. When his left hand swept the Kusanagi rapier, he wrapped the blade of the Kusanagi rapier with chakra. In this chakra, he deliberately left a thunder attribute chakra that will turn into electric current after 15 seconds. Every time the Kusanagi rapier collides with the rapier, a part of the chakra will be transmitted to the rapier. Whether the thunder attribute chakra will be transmitted to Weigelf's rapier, or when it will be transmitted, Rog himself didn't know. So before the 15 seconds were up, he took the initiative to end the attack, in order to see if the thunder attribute chakra was transmitted. It turned out that after he swung the rapier hundreds of times, the thunder attribute chakra was transmitted to the rapier. Whether the electric current could hurt Weigelf or not was not the main point. The main point was whether Weigelf could discover this move that even he himself didn't know if it worked or not. If Weigelf didn't discover it, then it meant that his guess was correct. Weigelf was the same as the guy who called himself God. She could only predict the enemy's conscious attack. Chapter 442. It was extremely difficult for a bronze player to perform a king-level maneuver. Similarly, it was not easy for a king-level player to perform a bronze-level maneuver. Anyone who could reach the king level would not have any obvious shortcomings in terms of awareness, skills, experience, mentality, and other aspects. But bronze-level players were different. In terms of these basic skills, bronze-level players did not have any shortcomings, but all of them were shortcomings. Therefore, in order to perform a bronze-level maneuver attack that Weigelf could not intuitively detect, Rog had to do something he had never done in a battle before. To put it nicely, it was called emptying the mind and giving control of the body to instinct, allowing the body to perform an attack that was completely out of the control of the mind. To put it bluntly, it was a dazed and absent-minded. Because the mind was already in a dazed and absent-minded state, the attack that the body would perform was something that even the person himself could not determine. When Rog completely emptied his mind, he fell into a philosophical state. Who am I? Where did I come from? Where am I going? At this moment, Rog seemed to have been possessed by the ancient Greek philosopher Plato. He began to think about the three ultimate philosophical questions in idealism that still had no answers. Of course, feeling that he was possessed by the ancient Greek philosopher Plato was just Rog's own opinion. As a member of the Warner Protoss, Victigny and Weigelf certainly did not know who Plato was. Therefore, from their point of view, Rog seemed to have been struck by a powerful mental retardation spell. He had turned from an invincible warrior to a village idiot who only knew how to chase after chickens and dogs. What's wrong with him? Looking at Rog, whose aura had undergone a drastic change in an instant, Victigny asked Wild, who was beside her. I don't know, it looks like he was hit by a mental retardation spell. But with his strength, even if he was hit by a mental retardation spell, he shouldn't have become like this. Weigelf couldn't understand how Rog could suddenly become such a fool. The Victigny sisters were worried that Rog was plotting something, so they didn't take the initiative to attack at all. They carefully guarded against his attacks. They did not take the initiative to attack, and Rog, who had already considered the three ultimate philosophical questions, could not take the initiative to attack. Thus, a slightly strange confrontation was born. Time slowly passed. When the Warner Protoss warriors in the camp couldn't help but whisper to each other, Victigny and Weigelf finally couldn't take it anymore. At this time, nearly 10 minutes had passed since Rog started thinking about philosophical questions. Victigny and Weigelf didn't know that Rog came alone, so they began to suspect that Rog was deliberately stalling for time to buy time for the troops behind. In the end, after looking at each other, Victigny and Weigelf made the decision to attack. Whether Rog really lost his mind or not, they didn't plan to continue the confrontation. In the blink of an eye, they arrived in front of Rog with lightning wrapped around their bodies. The weapons in their hands attacked Rog one after the other. However, just as Victigny's Hurricane Fury and Weigelf's rapier were about to hit Rog's body, he suddenly moved like a fool. Lightning body blink. Rog, who was expressionless as if he was in a daze, suddenly disappeared. The Hurricane Fury and rapier lost their target at the same time. When Rog's figure disappeared again, Victigny and Weigelf were even more convinced that he was stalling for time. Without any hesitation, Victigny and Weigelf retracted their weapons and began to sense Rog's whereabouts. But at this time Rog flashed behind Victigny like a ghost. Clang! Rog's Kusanagi sword was blocked by the Hurricane Fury, and it was directly sent flying by the hurricane fury. At the moment when the Kusanagi sword was sent flying, Weigelf's rapier once again appeared in front of Rog. In the past few years, Victigny and Weigelf have never slacked off, constantly honing their skills, in order to defeat Rog with their own hands one day. Stronger fighting techniques, more power of thunder, and more tacit joint attacks. Victigny and Weigelf's strength has indeed improved a lot, but in the past few years, it's not just the two of them who have improved significantly. Just when Weigelf's rapier was about to pierce Rog's throat, a large amount of chakra suddenly erupted from Rog's body. At the same time, his body spun at high speed like a top. 8 trigrams palm, revolving heaven. A light blue hemispherical chakra energy shield instantly formed, and Victigny and Weigelf were sent flying. The chakra energy shield appeared quickly and disappeared quickly. Almost at the moment when Victigny and Weigelf were sent flying, the high-speed chakra energy shield disappeared. Lightning body blink. Soft fist, 8 trigrams palm. Rog, who was still in the center of the energy shield, instantly flashed behind Weigelf, who was flying backward, and wrapped his hands around the light blue chakra. Before Weigelf could react, his hands hit Weigelf like bullets from a Gatling gun. Muda 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 muda. It took less than 2 seconds for Rog to strike all 64 palms of the 8 trigrams on Weigelf's body. He injected his chakra into her body and sealed the thunder power in her body. Although Victigny wanted to rescue Weigelf, she was too slow. Even after Rog finished his 64 palms, she was still more than 10 meters away from Rog. Although 64 palms of the 8 trigrams palm was not steel fist, Weigelf, who was hit by Rog all over her body, could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood. After sending Weigelf flying, Rog took out a flying Thor kunai and threw it at Victigny, who was rushing towards him. Clang. Although Rog's throwing technique was very good, his direct throwing attack was blocked by the wrath of the hurricane without any suspense. The flying Thor kunai that was sent flying by the wrath of the hurricane flew past Victigny's left shoulder. However, at this time, Rog's left hand held the flying Thor kunai that was sent flying. His right hand was holding a Super Jade Rasengan that was bigger than him. Flying Thor 2. Super Jade Rasengan. Boom. The Super Jade Rasengan in Rog's right hand hit Victigny like an intercontinental missile, and a terrible explosion sounded. Before Victigny could react, the Super Jade Rasengan in Rog's hand had hit her body. The huge explosion sound resounded through the entire camp, making the Warner Protoss soldiers who witnessed this scene could not help but feel nervous. From the moment Victigny and her sister attacked Rog until now, only a few seconds had passed. But in these few seconds, Rog used a set of not complicated ninjutsu and taijutsu combo to establish the victory in one fell swoop. Lightning body blink, 8 trigrams palm, revolving heaven, 8 trigrams palm 64 palms, flying Thor 2 Super Jade Rasengan. Except for the Super Jade Rasengan, the other moves were not particularly powerful. But he used these small moves to defeat Victigny and her sister, who had obviously improved their strength. Chapter 443. Asgard's Golden Palace inside the meeting hall. So you brought the two of them back? Thor, who was wearing his armor, sat at the head of the long table and looked helplessly at Rog and Victigny sitting in a row. Let me correct you. I didn't bring them back. I escorted them back to Asgard. They are now Asgard's captives. Escorting them back to Asgard is a very normal thing to do. Rog explained silently. Victigny and Victigny were also present. He couldn't tell Thor that the reason he brought them back was because the camp commanders were too weak. Imprisoning Victigny and Victigny in the camp was no different from letting them go. Although he asked Rog to solve the problem in Warnerheim, Thor didn't expect that after solving the problem in Warnerheim, Rog would bring back an even bigger problem to Asgard. Victigny and Victigny weren't ordinary people. Their mother was Gulwig, a powerful existence in Warner Protoss that was only slightly weaker than the sea god Njord. And this slight weakness wasn't just a slight weakness in terms of strength. If Warner Protoss wasn't a typical patriarchal society, the one sitting on the throne right now might not be the sea god Njord. Forget it. Since it's already like this, I'll let them stay in Asgard for a while. After saying that, Thor picked up a golden bell beside the table and shook it gently. As the bell rang, the closed door was pushed open by the royal guards. 2 royal guards wearing golden armor walked in. Take them to see Sif. Thor gave a simple order to the guards who came in. As a superior, he didn't need to give too many orders. The specific arrangements would naturally be handled by others. All he had to do was give out orders. After the guards led Victigny and Roland away, Thor continued to question Rog. How did you come up with the idea of bringing them back as captives? I thought you were just going to go on a killing spree, and then simply deal with the Warner Protoss provocation. They surrendered. Rog explained briefly. However, after seeing Thor's dissatisfied expression, he roughly explained what had happened. When he defeated Victigny with his unconscious battle instincts, the two sisters immediately chose to surrender. At that time, the problem in front of him changed from defeating the army of Warner Protoss to how to deal with the tens of thousands of surrendered soldiers. After a minute of serious consideration, he decided to be a friendly pacifist. He let go of this army that was basically undamaged. Then he took away the two main generals of the army. Although there were tens of thousands of people on one side and only two on the other, he was still clear on which was more important. As long as Victigny and Roland were still in Asgard's hands, the Warner Protoss wouldn't dare to act rashly. Unlike Njord, who had many descendants, Gulwig only had two daughters, Victigny and Weigelf. Therefore, even if some Warner Protoss had thoughts that they shouldn't have, Gulwig would make them completely calm down. After explaining to Thor what had happened and the situation of the three attacked camps, Rog left the meeting hall and returned to the room he had been staying in. The small episode in Warnerheim was over, so the only thing left was the matter of the goddess of death, Hel. He couldn't help much in the search for Hel's whereabouts for the time being. Therefore, before Hel's whereabouts were discovered, he would have a little leisure time. As for how long this leisure time would be, it would depend on how capable Heimdall, the guardian of Bifrost, and Asgard's intelligence personnel were. Time passed in the blink of an eye, and Rog had unknowingly stayed in Asgard for an entire week. Thor mobilized all of Asgard's intelligence forces, but in the past week they had found nothing. Not only that, Odin's situation was getting worse and worse, and his divine power was collapsing to the point where he couldn't maintain his form. The news of Odin's impending death couldn't be hidden in the end. At the same time, the news of the goddess of death, Hel, was leaked by someone, causing the entire Asgard to be filled with the aura of a storm. Even Tani, a tourist who had just arrived at Asgard for a few days, noticed this unusual atmosphere. Normally, even if Odin was about to die, Asgard wouldn't be in such a state of panic. The old king had left, and the new king had ascended to the throne. This wasn't the first time in Asgard's history that something like this had happened. However, the appearance of the goddess of death, Hel, made the originally normal process become abnormal. Hel was the eldest princess of Asgard, although Odin tried his best to hide her existence. However, what had happened in the past wouldn't disappear completely just because it was hidden. Hel had once conquered the 9 realms with Odin, and was imprisoned by Odin because of her ambition. All kinds of hidden past were dug up one by one. Even the fact that Hel was the former owner of Thor's hammer, that the name of the weapon was Sword of the Night Sky, and that she had a giant wolf mount named Fenrir were spread out. After knowing that these news suddenly spread outside, Rog first suspected Loki. However, it turned out that this matter had nothing to do with Loki at all. After careful investigation, they found that the news originally came from Jotunheim, the kingdom of the Frost Giants, and Muspelheim, the kingdom of the Flame Giants. Like Warner Protoss, after knowing that Odin was about to die, these Frost Giants and Flame Giants became a little restless. Although the news was leaked by the Frost Giants and Flame Giants, they didn't take the initiative to start a war like Warner Protoss. Instead, they stayed in their homes. At least on the surface that was the case. Golden Palace in the banquet hall. I've seen the design of the destroyer's armor. The operating principle is very unscientific, and there are also many problems with the performance design. Tani took a sip of Asgard's unique liquor and said with disdain, "The destroyer's armor uses magic and divine power, not science. You can't look at this armor with the scientific and technological eyes of Earth." Thor swallowed the barbecue in his mouth and answered silently. After hearing the conversation between Thor and Tani, Rog and Loki shook their heads helplessly. Since 3 days ago, Thor and Tani had similar conversations every night at dinner. The reason for these conversations was because of a commission from Thor. After knowing that Hel was the former owner of Thor's hammer, Thor found Tani, who was traveling in Asgard, and asked Tani to help him build new weapons and armor at the cost of fulfilling Tani's wish of interstellar travel. Furthermore, this ex that he had never known before had taken the initiative to come knocking on his door. No matter which world a man was from, he would have a strong desire to possess the things he liked. This desire to possess was an instinct that was deeply imprinted in a man's DNA. It was an existence that transcended rationality. When they were young, this desire was reflected in the monopolization of toys. When they grew up, this desire was reflected in the desire for money and power. At this moment, Thor was deeply provoked by the ex of Thor's hammer, Hela. He would not give Thor's hammer to Hela, nor would he give Asgard to Hela, nor would he give Loki to Hela. Therefore he had to do everything he could to increase his strength. For example, let Tani create powerful weapons and armor that Hela had never seen before. As the first princess of Asgard and a former criminal official, Hela's understanding of dwarven weapons was not inferior to his, and might even be better than his. This was also why he did not go to the dwarf king Aitsue but went to Tani instead. After all, before he was born, Hela had already completed the honor of conquering the 9 realms with Odin. While trying his best to increase his own strength, Thor did not forget to strengthen his teammates. He picked out a few magic letters from the top-secret library that only the king was qualified to enter and handed them to Loki, who was more like an assassin than a mage. At the same time, he also handed the corpse of the giant wolf Fenrir to Rog. As for why Rog made this request, he did not ask too much. After dinner, Rog did not participate in the discussion between Thor and Tani about the new weapons and armor. Instead, he went directly to the laboratory that Thor had specially arranged for him. In this laboratory of nearly 500 square meters, there were all kinds of Asgard's research instruments. In the corner of the laboratory, there was also a heavy ancient wooden desk. On the desk were magic books that were either opened or piled up together. In addition to these magic books, there was also a golden disc with a diameter of dozens of centimeters on the desk. In the center of the disc, there was a cluster of orange-yellow flames that seemed to never go out. The eternal fire. This cluster of flames, which was not much bigger than a palm, was the treasure that the flame giant Surtur was most proud of, the eternal fire that could increase his strength by a terrifying amount. This cluster of eternal fire was the deposit that Thor had paid to Rog in advance. If he could complete the task of defeating Hela together, then all the eternal fire in the palace's treasury would belong to him. Because there was only a small cluster, this eternal fire was not the most eye-catching existence in the laboratory. On the magic circle in the center of the laboratory, there was a huge corpse that was more than 10 meters in length. This was the corpse of the giant wolf Fenrir. Although it had been dead for more than 2,600 years, Fenrir's corpse was still generally intact. Only a little of its fur and flesh had disappeared. The goddess of death Hela was imprisoned in 639 BC. As her mount, even if Fenrir did not die in the same year, it would not have been too far apart. When Rog first saw Fenrir in the underground secret room of the Golden Palace Hall, he knew that this was the psychic beast that he had been looking for a long time. Although he had used the Punisher and Abomination as psychic beasts for a period of time, they were not real beasts after all, and it was inevitable that they did not live up to their names. However, Fenrir perfectly met his requirements for a psychic beast. After getting Fenrir's corpse, he began to study how to resurrect Fenrir with the eternal fire. He did not intend to use the Edo Tensei on Fenrir because it would make the resurrected Fenrir no longer pure. Its fangs could bite through Hulk's skin. Its skin could resist the continuous fire of the spaceship's machine guns. What Rog wanted was the original Fenrir, not the modified Fenrir. Chapter 445. Resurrecting a creature that had been dead for more than 2,000 years was not an easy task. Even in a world with magic, this wasn't something that anyone could do easily. In the exchange page of the system, there were several ninjutsu related to resurrection. For example, Edo Tensei, as well as reincarnation and reincarnation that required the caster's life as the price. Although Rog really wanted a real psychic beast, he was not crazy enough to use reincarnation and reincarnation to resurrect the giant wolf Fenrir. Since he did not intend to use ninjutsu, he naturally put his eyes on magic. Although he did not look like a mage usually, he had received orthodox Kamartaj magic education and was a real mage with the title of Ancient One's disciple. He did not know if there was any magic related to resurrection in Kamartaj's library, and he was not very interested. The reason was simple: he now had a resurrection method that had been successfully verified. The goddess of death, Hela, used the eternal fire and her own divine power to successfully resurrect the giant wolf Fenrir and her undead warriors. Although this scene could no longer be performed in this world, this did not prevent him from learning a little from Hela's method. He had the corpse of the giant wolf Fenrir. He also had the eternal fire. The only thing he lacked now was Hela's divine power of death. Rog did not intend to ask for Hela's help because this kind of request was destined to be fruitless. Compared to helping him, Hela would be more inclined to kill him directly. Therefore, from the beginning he excluded Hela from the list of people to ask for help. Although Hela had the divine name of the goddess of death and had awakened the divine power of death. But in this world, other than her, there were other existences who had mastered the domain of death. For example, the Lord of Hell, Mephisto. Rog did not have the idea of asking Hela for help because he planned to directly seek Mephisto's help. No matter which angle he looked at it from, his plan seemed a little unreliable. But he was full of confidence in his plan. As someone who had fought with Mephisto in Hell and left Hell alive, he did not feel that his plan would be dangerous. They were all old friends, so Mephisto probably wouldn't mind doing him a small favor. After flipping through Asgard's books on necromancy and dark magic, he successfully found a magic ritual that pointed to the Lord of Hell, Mephisto. He had seen a lot of magic rituals like this in Kamartaj. However, most of Kamartaj's magic rituals were directed at the Weshan Emperor, not an evil existence like Mephisto. It wasn't difficult to set up a magic ritual that pointed to Mephisto. According to the records, there were many mages who had set up a magic ritual and successfully contacted Mephisto. However, there were not many mages who could successfully obtain Mephisto's help. However, he was confident that he could move Mephisto. After checking the magic ritual that had already been set up, Rog guided the eternal fire on the golden disc to his left hand. Then he came to Fenrir's body. After taking a deep breath for a few seconds, he raised his right hand and summoned the hellfire that he had plundered from Ghost Rider Johnny. When the orange-red hellfire completely enveloped his right hand, he did not hesitate as he slammed his right hand on the floor of the laboratory and used the hellfire to activate the magic ritual. Activating a magic ritual did not necessarily require the use of hellfire. Other types of energy could be used as well. However, in order to attract Mephisto's attention faster, he chose to use the hellfire to activate the magic ritual. When the hellfire flowed across the ground and ignited the magic array carved on the ground, a temporary spatial passage connecting to Hell was constructed. This temporary spatial passage was different from Ghost Rider Johnny's Hellfire Gate. It could not allow creatures on both sides to pass through freely, and could only barely transmit consciousness and energy. When the spatial passage was completely stabilized, the hellfire burning on the magic array slowly floated into the air and condensed into a demon's head with curved horns. It really is you? Before Rog could say anything, this demon's head formed by the hellfire and larger than his body took the initiative to speak. Mephisto. Although the voice was different from what he remembered, he knew that it was Mephisto himself. That's right, it's me. It's been a long time. Rog replied calmly. I don't think you contacted me just to meet me. Cut the crap and get straight to the point. What exactly do you want from me? Mephisto did not intend to continue chatting with Rog and asked directly. Of course, if the magic ritual set up by Rog could last longer, he would not mind chatting with Rog about his wonderful past experiences. It's very simple. I hope you can do me a small favor and add some death and resurrection power to the eternal fire in my hands. I want to resurrect this fellow in front of me. Rog did not waste any time and directly stated his request. So you want to resurrect Fenrir? With the eternal fire, resurrecting Fenrir is indeed not difficult. But why should I help you? You rejected my good intentions the last time. Mephisto was still brooding over Rog's refusal to become his subordinate. Don't be so petty. No matter what, you're a lord of hell. There's no need to make things difficult for a small fry like me. Rog replied nonchalantly, and did not look like he was asking for help at all. Although he did need Mephisto's help now, he did not feel that he needed to act like a beggar. And strictly speaking, he was not here to ask for help, but to make a deal. There's no custom of helping others for free in hell. Show me your sincerity and I might consider it. Mephisto said in a tone that said, you know everything. Don't you just want a reward? No problem. Within 10 years, I'll take the initiative to go to hell once and spar with you again. How about this reward? Are you interested? Ever since the last time they fought, Rog knew that this old pervert Mephisto had his eyes on his soul. However, as long as he did not take the initiative to go to hell, Mephisto could not do anything to him. Therefore, he intended to give Mephisto a chance to obtain his soul. Of course, going to hell did not mean that he would definitely hand over his soul. If he wanted to obtain his soul, he would need to have some real ability. Deal. Rog had just finished speaking when Mephisto agreed. At the same time, an ancient sheepskin scroll flew out of the skull formed by hellfire. Sign it and I'll help you resurrect Fenrir. Chapter 446. The brownish-yellow ancient sheepskin scroll slowly floated in front of Rog and unfolded on its own, displaying the contents of the contract in front of him. The contents of the contract were basically the same as the remuneration he had mentioned earlier, written in English that he was familiar with. From the content, there was nothing wrong with the contract at all. There were no misleading words, nor were there any loopholes in the grammar. However, after reading the contents of the contract, Rog sighed helplessly. Although Mephisto seemed very easy to talk to now, he was ultimately a cunning demon who liked to hide loopholes in contracts. I say, can there be any trust between humans and demons? Rog raised his head and looked at the demon's head floating in the air with dissatisfaction. What do you mean by this? The contents of the contract were written according to the remuneration you mentioned. Are you going back on your word? Although the demon's head formed by hellfire was only a projection, it displayed an extremely realistic expression, just like Mephisto himself. Although I've only been to hell once and rarely interacted with you demons from hell, you can't treat me like an idiot. If I'm not wrong, these decorative patterns on the scroll should be some kind of hell's language. At first glance, there was indeed nothing wrong with the contents of the sheepskin scroll. However, the real contents of the contract were not just what he had said. Those patterns and lines that looked like they were just used to beautify the scroll were also a part of the contract. As expected of the man I've taken a liking to, you're indeed cautious, Mephisto said in an appreciative tone. After that, the patterns and lines on the scroll completely disappeared, leaving only the English parts that Rog could understand. You should be able to relax now, right? No, I'm still worried. Supercilious Eye, activate. Rog ignored Mephisto's gaze and directly activated Supercilious Eye. Using Supercilious Eye's supervision, he scanned the sheepskin scroll with extreme seriousness. There were no words that could not be seen with the naked eye. There were no energy-based languages or spells. There were no hidden traps or structures. Rog carefully observed every part and corner of the sheepskin scroll as if he was disarming a bomb. Indeed, there's no problem. After confirming that there was nothing wrong with the scroll, he closed Byakugan, raised his right hand and condensed chakra on his index finger. No matter what method was used to sign the name on the scroll, it would not affect the effect of the contract. Ink could do it, blood could do it, and so could chakra. Just as Rog's index finger was about to touch the parchment, he suddenly stopped and said quietly, I'm still a little worried. What are you worried about again? Mephisto's tone became a little displeased. Although the contract clearly states that as long as you resurrect Fenrir, I have to go to hell once within 10 years. However, resurrection for 1 second is still resurrection. That's why I think we need to discuss the time frame for Fenrir's revival. Rog said with a serious face as if he was really considering this question. For the first time, Mephisto realized that Rog wasn't as good as he had imagined. At least he was more talkative and neurotic than he had imagined. Suppressing the anger in his heart, Mephisto changed the contents of the contract again. The other terms were unchanged, but there was an additional sentence after the sentence about resurrecting Fenrir. Resurrect Fenrir and guarantee that Fenrir would have a natural lifespan of more than 100 years. 100 years of natural lifespan. Can I sign it now? No problem. Thank you for your generosity. Rog thanked him sincerely, raised his right hand again, and condensed chakra on his index finger. However, just as his finger was about to touch the parchment, he stopped again. What's wrong with you again? Although Mephistos tried his best to control his tone, the demon head floating in the air clearly displayed his dissatisfaction. Well, I thought about it again just now. You're a lord of hell. Logically speaking, I shouldn't doubt your ability. But Fenrir is a special life form after all. It's a little different from humans. So, before signing the contract, can you prove a little that you do have the ability to resurrect Fenrir? Of course, this doesn't require you to really resurrect Fenrir. I just want to confirm that you really have the authority related to death. If you don't mind, you can first add some death domain energy to the eternal fire to prove that you do have the ability to fulfill the contract. He raised his left hand and displayed the eternal fire in front of Mephistos. That's right, said Rog sincerely as he raised his left hand and displayed the eternal fire in front of Mephistos. Mephisto didn't expect Rog to be worried about this. To an archdevil of Bator, this was a humiliation. Isn't it just a stronger beast? As long as I want to, I can make this beast jump around at any time. Mephisto didn't say anything. He used his actions to prove his thoughts. The demon head floating in the air opened its mouth, and a ray of green energy flew out and into the eternal fire. With the entry of this green energy, the golden eternal fire suddenly changed color, turning into a strange green. Boy, do you see that? This is the death energy you want, the death energy that can awaken the dead. After the eternal fire had completely changed its color, Mephisto spoke again. There was a hint of disdain in his tone. "So this is the death energy as expected of a lord of hell?" Rog exclaimed after sensing the eternity fire that was now completely different from before. "Since you have proven your ability, then I will also prove my sincerity." As soon as his voice fell, Rog raised his right hand for the third time. Then he grabbed the parchment and rolled it up. Next, he threw the contract that he hadn't had time to sign into the summon scroll. You are deceiving me." After seeing Rog's actions, Mephisto finally reacted and roared angrily. "Don't say it so harshly, I don't intend to deceive you. I am a ninja with good professional ethics and morals. I will fulfill the agreement but not by signing a contract with you. Wait patiently, within 10 years, I will definitely go to hell to find you." After saying that, a burst of chakra erupted from Rog's body, completely destroying the magic formation on the ground. "Very good. As expected of the person I chose. How dare you?" Before Mephisto could finish speaking, the demon head made of hellfire shattered with a bang, and disappeared into the air like fireworks. He was prepared for this and found a forest far away from the Golden Palace in the town. As for what this forest was called, he didn't know and wasn't interested, because he would only come to this forest once and only once. After using quantum teleportation to bring Fenrir to the center of the forest, Rog directly left Fenrir's back. Then he used the special ninjutsu to train Psychic Beast. Mokutan Jutsu. Mokutan, Wood Dragon Jutsu. Fenrir, who stood up, was 4 or 5 meters tall. Its body and tail were nearly 15 meters. It was an out-and-out giant wolf. However, the wooden Arhat and the wooden dragon that Rog summoned at this time had a huge body size of more than 30 meters. Many times, a huge body meant a strong persuasive power. And Rog intended to prove this point again with facts. Arhat and the long hook-nosed wooden dragon surrounded Fenrir one after another. In Fenrir's puzzled eyes, Arhat and the long hook-nosed wooden dragon became the best dog trainers, using practical actions to prove what the most effective way to train a dog was. In the days when Hela conquered the 9 lands, Fenrir was a terrifying demonic beast that made countless enemies tremble in fear. It was synonymous with brutality and blood. But now times had changed. Not long after, Rog, who was sitting on a branch, heard the miserable howling of wolves. As time passed, the howling of wolves not only did not stop but became more intense. Under the silent night sky, waves after waves of mournful wolf howls rang out, adding some extra feeling to the dark night. Rog knew that Fenrir had a certain wisdom, but he didn't intend to talk to Fenrir. He didn't even tell Fenrir why he let Arhat and the wooden dragon train it. From the moonlight to the scorching sun in the sky, the tireless wooden dragon Arhat and the wooden dragon worked together to train Fenrir for more than 10 hours before they finally stopped the training process that would be strongly condemned by wolf lovers. Fenrir was indeed a very powerful demonic beast, an existence that could play a wild battle face-to-face with Hulk. However, even Hulk couldn't withstand the combined training of more than 30 meters of wooden Arhat and the wooden dragon. When Fenrir stuck out its long tongue and lay motionless on the ground breathing heavily, Rog came to it again. "Your master Hela is still alive, but you have no chance to return to her side. You have 2 choices now. The first is to refuse to be my psychic beast, and then be beaten to death by the 2 of them, a very cruel kind of death." At this point, Rog raised his finger and pointed at the wooden dragon and wooden Arhat. Then he continued, "The second choice is to become my psychic beast and follow me in the future. If there is a chance, I will try my best to find a suitable female wolf for you so that you can start a family and pass on the bloodline. Of course, this kind of thing depends on your fate. If the heavens destined you to be a single dog in this life, then don't resist, just obediently accept your fate." Glancing at Fenrir's intensely undulating abdomen, Rog took out the blood contract scroll that he had only used once from the psychic scroll. Different from the psychic scroll that was only 20 centimeters wide, the blood contract scroll was nearly half a meter wide, enough to put down Fenrir's claws. After the psychic blood contract scroll, Rog opened the scroll and put it in front of Fenrir. "You don't have to worry about being lonely after becoming my psychic beast. Do you see this green signature? He is my first psychic beast. It doesn't matter if you don't know how to write a name, just get some of your blood and put a claw print on it. I won't mind. Okay, you now have 10 seconds to consider. If you don't mind, I can start the countdown now. 10, 3, 2, When it heard that it had 10 seconds to consider, Fenrir really wanted to think seriously. However, it didn't expect that Rog's countdown was different from what it imagined. 1. Just when it was shocked by Rog's unexpected card, Rog ended the final countdown. Fenrir, who was half dead, couldn't help but widen its green eyes when it heard Rog say 1. It looked at Rog in disbelief. Then it looked up at Wooden Arhet and the long hook-nosed wooden dragon. What a pity, I thought you would be happy to become my psychic beast. While speaking, Rog shook his head regretfully, then reached out to the blood contract scroll on the ground. Chapter 448. Just when Rog's right hand was about to touch the blood contract scroll on the ground, Fenrir made a move that even it didn't expect. Fenrir, who was lying on the ground, raised its head slightly, then it stuck out its long red tongue and licked Rog's right hand. From the perspective of Fenrir's own intention, it actually didn't want to lick Rog's right hand. What it wanted was to prevent Rog from taking back the blood contract scroll. Fenrir's tongue was indeed very flexible, but for Rog it was still too slow. He casually stepped sideways, easily avoided Fenrir's tongue, and took the blood contract scroll on the ground. Woo, woo woo woo. After seeing Rog put away the blood contract scroll, Fenrir didn't hesitate and immediately made a fawning whining sound. Its pair of green eyes looked at Rog pitifully. The so-called demonic wolf dignity was now completely thrown to the back of Fenrir's head. Compared to the untouchable dignity, it valued its own life more. Moreover, it was full of interest to Rog's proposal to find a suitable female wolf. After experiencing death, this brutal demonic wolf that was once the nightmare of countless enemies had a deeper understanding of the preciousness of life. At the same time, it finally understood why its demonic wolves with low intelligence were keen to do some meaningless exercises that wasted physical strength with little female wolves after adulthood. Looking at Fenrir, who had begun to develop into a qualified pet dog, Rog nodded with satisfaction. Not bad, very energetic, a demonic wolf worth training. After sizing up Fenrir with satisfaction, Log put the blood contract scroll back on the ground and said with satisfaction, "Seeing that you've come to your senses in time, I'll give you one more chance. Last chance." This time Rog didn't count down. When he finished, Fenrir didn't hesitate and immediately used its sharp wolf claws to cut its skin, staining its right claw with green blood. Then, in the blank area of the blood contract scroll, pressed its paw print. "From now on you're my wolf. In the future, whoever I ask you to bite, you will rush up and bite even if it's your former master Hela. Of course, if you encounter any trouble in the future, I will cover you and never let others bully you. As for the other psychic beast benefits, I'll tell you slowly later." Opening the system's attribute panel, Rog glanced at the psychic beast column. Psychic beast, Punisher Frank, Edo 2 reincarnation, Abomination Bronsky, Giant Wolf Fenrir. The Punisher was the only one among the 3 summoned beasts that didn't have a blood contract. Since it was summoned by the Eddy Earth, it was naturally a summoned beast, so there was no need for it to sign a blood contract. As for Abomination and Fenrir, they had both been trained and voluntarily signed the blood contract scroll, thus becoming Log's psychic beasts. You can rest here for a while to recover. You can go and grab whatever you want to eat. Of course, humans. When I need you, I'll find you again. You can now enjoy your new wolf life. After that, Rog threw the blood contract scroll back into the psychic scroll, then opened the portal back to the laboratory. After coming out of the portal that was shining with golden sparks, he glanced at the slightly empty laboratory. In addition to Fenrir, he actually had another psychic beast that he wanted. Devourer. One of the most terrifying creatures in the universe. Its stomach was connected to a parallel universe, and it could devour almost everything. After he crippled Fokker, he had asked Konoha's intelligence department to look for information about the devouring soul beast. He hoped that he could capture this orange cat that would never get fat from eating. But unfortunately, until now, he didn't get any information about Devourer. If he could turn Fenrir and the flapping Yuan beast into his own psychic beasts, then he would be considered a winner in life with both a cat and a dog. After a little fantasy in his mind, he left the laboratory, found the guard station near the laboratory, and asked them to send the magic books in the laboratory back to the Golden Palace Library. Those magic books were the collection of the Golden Palace. After reading them, of course, they had to be returned to the original owner. After instructing the guards, he happily walked toward Tani's laboratory. Resurrecting Fenrir was his pre-war preparation plan. After completing his plan smoothly, he couldn't help but be curious about Tani's progress. Although most of the Iron Man armors made by Tani were products of technology in Rog's memory, Tani also made several sets of magic armors. Kami Assembly Armor, Sword in the Stone Armor, God Slayer Armor, Supreme Warlock Armor. However, Rog only saw these armors in manga. As for whether Tani in this world could still make these armors, he wasn't sure. It didn't take long for him to come to the laboratory that Thor specially prepared for Tani and saw Tani, who was designing a new type of armor. "Why are you here? Did your wolf cub come back to life?" Tony, who was sitting on the high-back chair, raised his head and glanced at Roger before returning his gaze back to the table. Rog didn't hide his plan to resurrect Fenrir, and there was no way to hide this kind of thing. Yes, it came back to life and volunteered to join us, intending to fight against its evil former owner with us. "I didn't expect you to really do it, you are really a madman." Tani stopped calculating data with his right hand and sighed. "It's okay, it's not particularly crazy." As he spoke, Rog's eyes involuntarily fell on the destroyer armor that had been beaten into scrap iron by the wooden man. Looking at the once majestic destroyer armor now piled up in the corner like scrap metal, he couldn't help but miss the scene of the first time he used the wooden arhet to perform the Gatling fist technique. After silently sighing in his heart, he picked up an armor design drawing on the table. This is an armor drawing that has been completed. The shape of the new armor is more than 80% similar to the destroyer armor. The rest of the design incorporates Tani's design concept. In short, the new armor that Tani designed for Thor is a bit like the destroyer armor that incorporates the style of Tani's Iron Man armor. This image looks a bit familiar. As soon as he saw the design of the new armor, Rog felt that he had seen something similar to it somewhere before. This is the anti-Thor armor. After carefully thinking about it, he finally remembered where he had seen this armor before. The new armor that Tani built for Thor turned out to be the anti-Thor armor that he had seen in manga. Thor's new armor is actually the anti-Thor armor, and he began to be a little confused. Chapter 449. What's the name of this armor? Rog put down the blueprint in his hand and could not help but ask. It's not confirmed yet. Anti-Hela armor or anti-death armor. It doesn't matter what it's called. Tani did not look up and continued to calculate the data. Luckily it's not called anti-Thor armor. Otherwise, Thor would definitely suspect that you're on Hela's side. Rog complained in his heart. What about the weapon? What new weapon did you design for Thor? Rog continued to ask. It's still a hammer, a bigger hammer. With that, Tani found the blueprint of a new weapon from a pile of blueprints and handed it to Rog. Just as Tani said, the new weapon was a hammer. However, compared to Thor's hammer, the new hammer designed by Tani was much bigger. How big was it? Rog looked at the standard numbers on it. The hammer was 1.2 meters long, 45 centimeters wide, and 60 centimeters tall. From the looks of it, the new hammer designed by Tani was a super enlarged version of Thor's hammer, directly using the design style of Thor's hammer. Have you shown the blueprint of this hammer to Thor? Although Thor loved hammers and even had the funny nickname of the Hammer God, it was still not enough. Rog still felt that the new hammer designed by Tani was a little too big. I've seen it and he likes it a lot. Alright, you win. Big hammer 80, small hammer 40. This sentence appeared in his mind involuntarily. After imagining the scene of Thor fighting with two hammers, one big and one small, Rog tactfully shut his mouth. Then he left Tani's laboratory and decided to return to his room to have a good sleep. Controlling the wooden arhet and the long beak-nosed wooden dragon for more than 10 hours wasn't enough to exhaust his chakra, but it was still very tiring. Under the service of the maids of the Golden Palace, he enjoyed a relaxing bath service that made him feel both physically and mentally comfortable. This damned feudal society degenerate life. A week later in the conference hall of the Golden Palace. This is a letter of challenge from Hela. With that, Thor, who was sitting at the head of the table, passed Hela's letter of challenge to Rog, who was sitting at the head of the table. After receiving the letter of challenge, Rog casually glanced at it. The content was very simple. There was only one sentence. 3 days later in Jotunheim the two armies will face off. The goddess of death did not plan to sneak back to Asgard. Instead, she openly issued a challenge and set a date for the final battle. It had to be said that Hela's method was very domineering. Although her strength would increase significantly after she stepped onto Asgard, she was still a little weak. However, she did not do so. Instead, she directly challenged Thor in Asgard. What I lost, I will take back with my own hands. This might be Hela's true thoughts at this time. A battle between the two armies? She has organized another undead army? Rog said in confusion while looking at Heimdall on the left side of the long table. Hela doesn't only have an undead army now. She also has an entire frost giant army. She is now the queen of Jotunheim. At this point Heimdall lowered his head in shame. He was the guardian of Bifrost and had the eye of the god that could perceive everything. He was the main force in searching for Hela's whereabouts. However, just as he was searching for Hela all over the world, Hela actually became the queen of Jotunheim right under his nose. To him this was undoubtedly a slap to his face. If Hela had not taken the initiative to appear in Jotunheim and sent a frost giant to deliver the letter of challenge, he would not have known that Hela was in Jotunheim until now. Queen of Jotunheim? After hearing Heimdall's description, Tani, Loki, the three warriors of Sengoku, and Sif all looked puzzled. Tani was puzzled about what kind of place Jotunheim was. Sif and the others were puzzled about how Hela had subdued these frost giants. Although Loki had stabbed his biological father to death in the last royal family dispute and had almost destroyed Jotunheim with Bifrost, bringing a fatal blow to the frost giants like a world-ending natural disaster. However, Jotunheim was still a kingdom that belonged to the frost giants. It had only been half a month since Hela had broken out of her predicament. It only took half a month to take Jotunheim's frost giant under his command. This efficiency could be said to be terrifying. Even if Asgard mobilized all his troops, he would not be able to completely take down Jotunheim in half a month. However, Hela had done something that Asgard's army could not do by herself. Although the battle had not yet begun, Sif and the others could already feel the immense pressure brought by Hela. Compared to Sif and the others, Rog and Tani were much calmer. One of them felt that it was still within the acceptable range, while the other did not know what this meant at all, so they were extremely calm. What do you think of Hela's letter of challenge? Looking at Sif and the others, whose expressions were getting worse and worse, Thor spoke. I have an immature suggestion that everyone can consider. Rog glanced around and continued, although Hela has an undead army and a frost giant army, this is not particularly troublesome. As long as we aim the Bifrost at Jotunheim and launch at full power. When the time comes, not to mention destroying Hela's army, even destroying the entire Jotunheim won't be difficult. Thor and the others thought that Rog would have an exquisite plan, but they did not expect that Rog's suggestion was to directly destroy the entire Jotunheim. A full-power Bifrost could indeed completely destroy Jotunheim, but such an indiscriminate large-scale destructive attack had never been used even in the process of conquering the 9 worlds by Odin. This method had already gone beyond the scope of war and had risen to the level of genocide. The last person who had such an idea was Loki when his ambitions were inflated. While Thor and the others looked at Rog in disbelief, Loki showed an expression of approval to Rog. Without a word of disagreement, he would directly kill him. Loki liked this character very much. After looking at Rog silently for more than 10 seconds, Thor sighed helplessly, shook his head and said, "No. We can't do this. Even if we destroy Jotunheim, it won't cause much harm to Hela. With her strength, she can leave before Jotunheim is destroyed." In the end, Thor rejected Rog's suggestion. "If we don't do this, then we can only sacrifice the lives of those ordinary soldiers. You and I can entangle Hela, but we can't deal with her army at the same time. You should know this very well." Although Rog's suggestion was crazy, it could prevent the deaths of ordinary soldiers to the greatest extent. Although using the Bifrost to attack Jotunheim was a very unfair thing for the Frost Giants, the Frost Giants still had the advantage. But war was never fair. Since they stood in the wrong position, of course they had to pay the corresponding price. No, Asgard won't do this and Father won't want to see this. Thor did not want to sacrifice the lives of ordinary soldiers, but he still could not accept the suggestion of using Bifrost to launch an indiscriminate destructive attack. He knew that this was a very cruel thing for those ordinary soldiers. But for Asgard he could only do this. Asgard must not be synonymous with tyrant and destruction. Absolutely not. Chapter 450. Asgard, Golden Palace Hall. Thor was wearing a silver-white anti-Hera armor as he sat on the throne in the Golden Palace Hall with a serious expression. On the left and right of the throne there were 2 warhammers, one big and one small. The small one was Thor's hammer. The big one was the new weapon that Tani had created for Thor, the Thunder Titan's hammer. On the stairs on the side of Thor's hammer stood the Rainbow Bridge Guardian Heimdall, Sif, and the 3 warriors of Sengoku. On the side of the Thunder Titan's hammer stood Loki, Rog, Tani, and Hulk. Hulk was not originally on the list, and Thor did not specifically summon Hulk. The reason why he was here was purely because of Little Pepper. 2 days ago, when Tani returned to Earth and planned to bring Mark 46 to Asgard, he was stopped by Little Pepper. Note 1. Little Pepper did not agree with Tani participating in the war between Asgard and Hela. According to Tani, he used a strong attitude to reject Little Pepper because he did not want to abandon Thor and Rog. However, Rog heard a completely different version from Hulk's mouth. Tani did not convince Little Pepper. In order to reassure Little Pepper, Tani took the initiative to ask Hulk to accompany him, and in the end Little Pepper agreed. Thor warmly welcomed Hulk's arrival. Loki, on the other hand, had been appearing and disappearing unpredictably since the day Hulk arrived. If it was not for the fact that everyone had to gather before going to war, Rog felt that he might not even be able to see Loki today. Outside the stairs were the generals of Asgard's army. As for the ordinary soldiers, they gathered in the square outside the Golden Palace, ready to go to war at any time. Thor, who was sitting on the throne, glanced at the people in the Golden Palace with a dignified gaze, and said slowly in a serious tone like Odin, "Let's go." At the same time, a grand horn sounded outside the Golden Palace. As the horn sounded, Thor slowly stood up, holding Thor's hammer and Thunder Titan's hammer in his hands, and walked step by step toward the Rainbow Bridge. The Golden Palace was quite a distance away from the Rainbow Bridge, and as the commander-in-chief, Thor, of course, it was impossible to walk to the Rainbow Bridge. At the entrance of the palace hall, there was a handsome Pegasus with its white fur white snow. This Pegasus was called Sleipnir, and it was Odin's mount. Note 2. Thor preferred to fly over with Thor's hammer instead of riding Thor's hammer. However, as the commander-in-chief of the army and Asgard's regent, he couldn't do as he pleased in this regard, and could only lead the army according to tradition. When Thor rode the handsome Pegasus that originally belonged to Odin, except for Rog and Hulk, everyone else rode the Pegasus that had already been prepared and slowly walked toward the Rainbow Bridge Hall. Rog didn't ride a Pegasus because he had a better mount, Fenrir. Hulk didn't ride a Pegasus because he didn't know how to ride one at all, and those Pegasus were instinctively afraid of him. As long as Hulk touched these Pegasus would instantly go crazy, as if they had been touched by their natural enemy. Under the leadership of Thor, Asgard's army started from the Golden Palace Square and marched all the way to the Rainbow Bridge Hall. Then, like dumplings, they walked into the entrance of the Rainbow Bridge one batch after another. The Rainbow Bridge was worthy of being a strategic weapon of war. It only took a few seconds for Thor, Rog, and others to arrive at the bone-chilling Jotunheim. Behind them were teams of Asgard's army. Cold. Very cold. Extremely cold. Rog's first feeling when he came to Jotunheim was like wearing thin summer clothes to the South Pole in winter. The ubiquitous cold wind blew from all directions and quickly took away the body's temperature. Without any hesitation, Rog directly covered himself with a layer of light blue chakra coat to completely isolate himself from the cold wind. When the warmth returned to his body, Rog glanced at Hulk, who was only wearing a pair of thin elastic shorts. The cold that was fatal for ordinary people was nothing to Hulk, whose physical fitness was so good that it was a cheat. He even liked this rare cold weather a little. Although Tani, who was wearing Mark 46, did not have a strong physique, he did not need to worry about the temperature at all with the armor wrapped around him. As time passed, Asgard's army continued to appear behind them, forming a phalanx. Several hundred meters in front of them, there were two large armies. Dark blue skin and blood-red eyes were the Frost Giant army. The ones with dark skin and green eyes were Hela's undead army. It had to be said that Hela had chosen a good place. In a cold world like Jotunheim, every corpse could be properly preserved, unlike other worlds where only skeletons were left. When Asgard's army was completely assembled, Jotunheim's new queen, the goddess of death, Hela, rode a ferocious frost behemoth full of strong muscles to the front of the Frost Giant army and the undead army. She calmly looked at Asgard's army opposite her. However, in the next second, a trace of anger appeared on her face. Fenrir. Hela saw her old partner, Fenrir, and Rog, who was riding on Fenrir's back with a light blue glow all over his body. With just a glance, Hela saw the difference in Fenrir. The power of death. On Fenrir's body she saw an extremely rich power of death. It only took a few seconds for Hela to recognize the source of this power of death and roughly speculate on Fenrir's state. Fenrir died and was resurrected by the power of death in Hell. Although Hela had not been to Hell, she was not unfamiliar with it. If she had not been imprisoned by Odin back then, she would have even led an army to Hell and conquered the world that had never been conquered by anyone. Fenrir, come here. Hela ignored Thor, who was riding the eight-legged horse, Sleipnir, and said directly to Fenrir. The whistling cold wind not only did not cover Gila's voice, but it also clearly passed her voice into Fenrir's ears. Hearing Gila's call, Fenrir instinctively raised his right claw. However, just as his right claw was about to step forward, he suddenly realized something. He silently retracted his right claw, whined softly, and lowered his head. Although Rog did not understand what Fenrir was saying, he could understand Fenrir's meaning. My current master is Rog and I will only listen to Rog's orders. Good attitude, I'm very satisfied. Rog patted Fenrir in a good mood. You're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.